The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web. But what happens when something from beyond the stars arrives, something built not on mystical energy, but on the fragile hope that different species can choose peace over war? The anomaly registered on Republic sensors 3 parsecs from Kashyyyk. Not a ship. Not a fleet. Something that defied every classification protocol in the Navicomputer databases. The object measured 5 miles in length, rotating slowly on its axis like some immense cylinder adrift in the void. Its hull bore scars of battle and the wear of years, but also something else: lights. Thousands of lights flickering through viewports, suggesting life, civilization, an entire community enclosed within that impossible structure. Captain John Sheridan stood on the command deck of Babylon 5, staring through the viewport at a star field that was utterly, completely wrong. The constellations were alien. The background radiation signature didn't match any known region of space. And the jump gate, their only connection to Earth, the Minbari, the Centauri, everything they'd ever known, was dead. Not damaged. Dead. As if the very laws of physics governing jump point technology had simply ceased to exist. "Status report," Sheridan said, his voice carrying the forced calm of a commander who'd learned to project confidence even when the universe stopped making sense. Commander Susan Ivanova looked up from her console, her expression grim. "We've got full power to all systems. Life support is stable. But Captain, the jump gate isn't responding. It's like hyperspace doesn't exist here. Or exists differently. Every time we try to open a jump point, we get nothing." Lieutenant Commander Ivanova had seen the Babylon station through Earth-Minbari war tensions, political assassination attempts, and conflicts that threatened to tear known space apart. But Sheridan could see the edge of real fear in her eyes. They were stranded. "Where's Ambassador Delenn?" Sheridan asked. "In the Minbari section," Ivanova replied. "She's been in meditation since the transition. Says she needs to understand what she's sensing." Sheridan nodded. If anyone could make sense of the metaphysical implications of dimensional displacement, it would be Delenn. The Minbari had always possessed an almost spiritual relationship with the universe that humans like him could barely comprehend. Security Chief Michael Garibaldi's voice crackled over the comm, "Captain, you need to see this. We're picking up transmissions. A lot of them. Military frequencies, commercial traffic, even what looks like entertainment broadcasts. This place is crowded." "On my way," Sheridan responded. He turned to Ivanova. "Get me a full sensor sweep of local space. I want to know what we're dealing with before something decides to deal with us first." The observation dome offered the best view of their new reality. Sheridan arrived to find Garibaldi already there, datapad in hand, standing beside the angular form of Ambassador Carr. The Narn's red eyes were fixed on the distant stars with an expression Sheridan had learned to recognize, the look of a survivor calculating odds. "Captain Sheridan," Carr rumbled. "We are not alone. Far from it. Initial scans suggest this region of space supports millions of inhabited systems. The scale of civilization here appears to dwarf our own." Garibaldi handed Sheridan the datapad. "We've intercepted fragmentary transmissions. The language is completely unknown, but the data structures suggest advanced technology. Faster-than-light communication, energy signatures we can't quite classify, and weapon discharges that would make a Minbari war cruiser look like a training exercise." Sheridan studied the data, his strategic mind already working through scenarios. They were vulnerable. Babylon 5 wasn't designed for deep space combat, it was a diplomatic station, a sanctuary, a place where conflicts ended rather than began. But it had teeth when necessary. The station's defense grid could hold off raiders or even a modest fleet, and their Starfury squadrons were among the best trained in Earth Alliance space. Except Earth Alliance didn't exist here. Neither did the Minbari Federation, the Centauri Republic, or the Narn regime. They were utterly alone, 250,000 souls from a dozen species, adrift in someone else's galaxy. Recommendations? Sheridan asked. Carr's expression was thoughtful. In my experience, Captain, when one finds oneself in unknown territory, there are three options. Hide and hope to remain unnoticed. Flee and hope to find safe harbor. Or announce oneself and hope for diplomatic contact rather than military response. With a 5-mile station broadcasting power signatures across half the sector, hiding isn't really an option, Garibaldi added. And we've got nowhere to flee to. Which leaves. We make contact, Sheridan finished. On our terms. Prepare a first contact package. Mathematical constants, star charts from our universe, linguistic primers. Broadcast it on all frequencies. And make it clear we come in peace. Famous last words, Garibaldi muttered, but he was already moving to execute the order. Sheridan watched the unfamiliar stars and thought about the impossible journey that had brought them here. Babylon 5 had always stood for one principle above all others, that despite differences, despite conflicts, despite the shadows lurking in every species past, the future could be built on understanding rather than war. They'd created something unique, a place where humans and Minbari who'd slaughtered each other by the thousands could work side by side. Where Narn and Centauri could share the same corridor without reaching for weapons. Where even the mysterious Vorlons maintained an embassy. Now they'd have to prove that principle could work in a galaxy that didn't know them, didn't need them, and might not want them. The comm chimed. It was Delenn's voice, soft but urgent. Captain, I must speak with you immediately. I have sensed something. Something vast and ancient that permeates this space. It is not hyperspace. It is something else entirely. Something alive. Sheridan felt a chill run down his spine. In his experience, when Delenn called something alive in that particular tone, reality was about to get significantly more complicated. I'm on my way, he said. Then, to the observation dome at large, all hands, general quarters. Until we know what we're dealing with, I want full combat readiness. We didn't survive the Shadow War just to get blindsided in a new galaxy. As klaxons began their measured warning throughout Babylon 5's 5 miles of rotating hull, Sheridan allowed himself one moment of honest reflection. They'd been given a mission once, to create a place where species could resolve differences through words rather than weapons. That mission hadn't changed. Only the galaxy had. Time to introduce themselves to the neighbors. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Republic cruiser Negotiator dropped out of hyperspace with the precision that marked all Jedi-commanded vessels. On the bridge, Obi-Wan Kenobi studied the sensor readouts with the careful attention that had kept him alive through countless campaigns. Beside him, Commander Cody's helmet tilted slightly as the clone officer processed the same impossible data. General, Cody said, his voice carrying the subtle inflection that distinguished him from his brothers, tactical analysis suggests this object is approximately 8 kilometers in length, rotating to generate artificial gravity. No hyperdrive signature. No ion trail. It's as if it simply appeared. Indeed, Obi-Wan murmured, stroking his beard. The Force rippled around the strange cylinder in ways he couldn't quite interpret. Not dark. Not light. Simply, different. Like a stone dropped into a pond, creating wavelets that didn't quite follow the expected pattern. And their transmission? A protocol droid shuffled forward. The mathematical constants are universal, General Kenobi, but the linguistic structure suggests no relation to any known language family. However, the intent is clear. They identify themselves as Babylon 5, describe themselves as a diplomatic station, and request peaceful contact. Obi-Wan considered this. In 3 years of war, he'd seen separatist tricks of every variety. But this felt different. The sheer audacity of the transmission, broadcast on every frequency, making no attempt at stealth, suggested either supreme confidence or genuine diplomatic intent. "Commander, take us in. Standard approach. Weapons cold but ready. And have a gunship standing by with a diplomatic team." "Sir, are you planning to board that station yourself?" Obi-Wan smiled slightly. When someone extends an invitation this elaborate, it would be rude not to accept. Captain Sheridan watched the approaching vessel with the eyes of a tactician. The ship was elegant in a way that suggested both military purpose and aesthetic consideration, roughly a kilometer long, shaped like a dagger, bristling with turbolaser batteries that his sensors couldn't quite classify. It moved with the confidence of a predator, but it hadn't opened fire. That was something. "They're launching a smaller craft," Ivanova reported. "Looks like a diplomatic shuttle. Armed, but not aggressively postured." Sheridan nodded. "Have security meet them at docking bay 7. Full honor guard, but keep the PPG rifles set to stun and out of immediate sight. Let's make it clear we're prepared but not paranoid." Garibaldi's voice came through his link. "Captain, I'm already there. And you might want to see this. We're picking up some very unusual energy readings from the approaching shuttle. Like nothing in our database." "Unusual how?" "Like organic energy patterns overlaid on mechanical systems. It's bizarre, Captain. Almost as if the ship itself is alive in some way." Sheridan exchanged a glance with Ivanova. "Stay sharp, people. We're about to find out what kind of galaxy we've landed in." The docking procedure went smoothly despite the incompatible technologies. Babylon 5's docking collars were designed for Earth Alliance and alien vessels from their own continuum, but the station's engineers, under the hurried direction of Maintenance Chief Lou Welch, managed to create an emergency airlock seal that would hold. When the seal was confirmed, Sheridan stood in the docking bay with an honor guard of human and Narn security officers. Garibaldi stood to his left, hand resting casually near his PPG. To his right stood Ambassador Delenn, serene in her Minbari robes, her bone crest catching the overhead lights. She'd insisted on being present, claiming she needed to sense these newcomers directly. The airlock hissed open. 6 figures emerged, and Sheridan felt his strategic assessment shift immediately. The lead figure was human, or at least humanoid enough to pass for human at a glance. He wore robes of brown and cream, carried himself with the balanced grace of a trained warrior, and had a metal cylinder hanging from his belt that practically screamed weapon despite its innocuous appearance. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes were sharp with intelligence and wariness, and behind him came clone soldiers. Sheridan recognized identical genetics when he saw it. Not natural twins. Manufactured soldiers, all bearing the same face beneath white armor that looked both advanced and oddly ceremonial. They carried rifles that hummed with barely contained energy. "Welcome to Babylon 5, Sheridan said, stepping forward with his hand extended in the universal gesture of greeting. "I'm Captain John Sheridan, commanding officer of this station." The robed man studied Sheridan's hand for a moment, then grasped it firmly. His grip was strong, his palm calloused. A warrior's hand. "Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jedi Knight of the Republic. These are troopers of the Grand Army. We received your transmission and came to investigate." "Investigate," Sheridan repeated with a slight smile. "A polite word for determine if we're a threat. I appreciate the honesty. Would you like the diplomatic tour or the tactical briefing?" Obi-Wan's eyebrow rose slightly. "You're remarkably candid for a first contact scenario. In my experience, Master Kenobi, the best way to establish trust is to skip the performance. We're stranded here through circumstances beyond our control. We have no hostile intent. But we're not helpless, and we're not naive. So let's establish where we stand with each other." Something shifted in Obi-Wan's expression, a flicker of approval, perhaps. A refreshing approach. Very well. The Republic controls much of this galaxy, but we're currently engaged in a conflict with a separatist movement that threatens galactic stability. Your arrival in neutral space has created complications. Complications, Garibaldi muttered. There's that word again. Delenn stepped forward, and Sheridan saw Obi-Wan's attention shift immediately to her. The Jedi's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of genuine surprise he'd shown. I am Delenn of Mir, she said in her precise, musical voice. I serve as Minbari ambassador to this station. I sense something in you, Master Kenobi. Something familiar and yet alien. A presence that flows through all things. Obi-Wan's hand had moved unconsciously to his lightsaber hilt. You're Force-sensitive, he said slowly. But not trained. And not quite, you feel different. As if you're touching the Force through a different medium. I do not know what this Force is, Delenn replied, tilting her head in that characteristic Minbari gesture of inquiry. But I sense what the Vorlons have taught us to recognize, the energy that binds all living things, that flows through the universe itself. Is this what you call the Force? The two stood regarding each other with an intensity that made Sheridan slightly uncomfortable. He'd seen Delenn interact with other Force-sensitive beings in their own universe, the Vorlons, certain Minbari, even a few humans with psi abilities. But this was different. This was like watching two people discover they spoke dialects of the same spiritual language. Commander Cody broke the moment. General, perhaps we should proceed with the tour. The Council will want a full report. The Council, Sheridan said, filing that information away. Would that be your government? The Jedi Council governs the Jedi Order, Obi-Wan explained, his attention returning to more immediate concerns. The Galactic Senate governs the Republic itself. Both will be very interested in your arrival. A station of this size, appearing without warning near Republic space, housing multiple species we've never encountered. Could be seen as a threat, Sheridan finished. Hence your military escort and clone soldiers. I understand, Master Kenobi. In your position, I'd do the same. But let me be clear, Babylon 5 exists for one purpose. We're a diplomatic station. A neutral ground where conflicts can be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. We've maintained that neutrality through civil wars, attempted coups, and conflicts that make your separatist crisis look like a border dispute. Bold words, Obi-Wan observed. Proven words, Carr interjected, his deep voice resonant in the docking bay. I am Carr, representative of the Narn regime. Or rather, what was the Narn regime before we found ourselves in your reality? Captain Sheridan speaks truth. This station has stood as neutral ground between species who have slaughtered each other for generations. It has been a sanctuary when all other sanctuaries failed. One of the clone troopers, Cody, Sheridan realized, spoke quietly into his comm unit. Reporting back, no doubt. Sheridan couldn't blame him. If he'd been in the clone's position, he'd be doing exactly the same thing. I think, Obi-Wan said carefully, that this conversation would benefit from continuation in a more comfortable setting. Might we discuss this over whatever refreshment you consider appropriate? Sheridan smiled. Now they were getting somewhere. We have an ambassadorial dining room that's seen more diplomatic crises resolved than I care to count. Garibaldi, arrange an escort. Master Kenobi, if you and your men would follow me. As they walked through Babylon 5's corridors, Sheridan watched Obi-Wan's reactions carefully. The Jedi's eyes tracked everything, security positions, structural reinforcements, the mix of species moving through the corridors. Humans, Minbari, Narn, even a few Centauri in their elaborate costume. The diversity seemed to genuinely surprise him. In the Republic, Obi-Wan said slowly, we pride ourselves on being a multi-species democracy. But I've never seen such casual integration. Your crew doesn't segregate by species at all. Can't afford to, Ivanova replied. When you're 250,000 beings from a dozen species sharing 5 miles of station, you either learn to get along or you die. We chose getting along. They passed through the Zocalo, Babylon 5's commercial and social heart. The marketplace was bustling despite the crisis, with vendors hawking goods, species mingling, and the constant background hum of dozens of languages creating a tapestry of sound. Sheridan saw Obi-Wan pause, saw the Jedi close his eyes briefly as if sensing something beyond the physical. "Remarkable," Obi-Wan murmured. "The Force flows through this place with surprising harmony. Given the diversity, I would expect more conflict, more discord in the patterns. But instead there's balance?" Delenn suggested softly. "Yes," Obi-Wan said, opening his eyes to meet her gaze. "Exactly that." The ambassadorial dining room offered privacy and comfort. As they settled around the table, Sheridan, Delenn, Carr, and Garibaldi facing Obi-Wan and Commander Cody, the real conversation could begin. "Your station is impressive," Obi-Wan said. "But I must be frank, Captain Sheridan. The Republic is at war. Resources are stretched thin. Trust is a luxury we can ill afford. Your arrival raises questions that the Jedi Council, and more importantly, the Senate, will demand answers to." "Then let me provide those answers," Sheridan replied. "We came here through a dimensional rift. Not by choice. Our jump gate technology doesn't function in your version of hyperspace. We can't go home. We're not spies, we're not an invasion force, and we're not interested in taking sides in your war. We're diplomats, Master Kenobi. It's what we do." Obi-Wan leaned back, considering. "And yet diplomacy without power is merely hopeful rhetoric. You must have defenses. Capabilities. In a galaxy at war, neutrality is a position that requires strength to maintain. We have defenses," Garibaldi confirmed. "And we know how to use them. But we'd rather not have to." The Jedi was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his tone was thoughtful. "I believe I understand your position. But understanding and convincing the Council are different matters. They will want guarantees. Inspections, perhaps. Assurances that your technology won't fall into Separatist hands." Sheridan felt his jaw tighten. This was the part where every first contact went wrong, when trust gave way to demands, when diplomacy became coercion. But before he could respond, Delenn spoke. "Master Kenobi," she said quietly, "you sense the Force flowing through this station. You feel the balance we have achieved. Can you not also sense that we speak truthfully? That our intentions are precisely what we claim?" Obi-Wan met her eyes, and again Sheridan saw that strange moment of connection between them. Finally, the Jedi nodded slowly. "I can," he admitted. "But I am not the Republic. And the Republic is led by beings far more cynical than I." "Then we'll convince them," Sheridan said firmly. "One conversation at a time. That's how Babylon 5 has always worked. We don't expect instant trust. We earn it." Obi-Wan smiled faintly. "You may find the galaxy more resistant to trust than you expect, Captain. But I admire your optimism." He stood, the clone troopers immediately coming to attention. "I will report to the Council. With your permission, I'd like to leave a small security detail here to establish a communication relay. And I suspect you'll be receiving official contact from the Senate within the next standard day." "We'll be ready," Sheridan replied, rising to clasp the Jedi's hand once more. As Obi-Wan and his men departed, Garibaldi let out a slow breath. "Well, that could have gone worse." "It's not over," Sheridan said, watching the Jedi's retreating form. "That was just the opening move. Now comes the real test, proving we can maintain neutrality in a galaxy that doesn't believe neutrality exists." Delenn placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have done it before, John. We will do it again." Sheridan hoped she was right. But something in Obi-Wan's final words nagged at him. A galaxy more resistant to trust than they expected. He'd built his career on the assumption that trust could be earned, that understanding could bridge any divide. He was about to find out if that assumption held true in a galaxy far, far away from everything he'd ever known. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant rose like a monument to ancient power, its 5 spires reaching toward a sky choked with endless traffic streams. Within its meditation chamber, the Jedi Council convened in a circle of austere chairs, their attention focused on the holographic projection rotating slowly before them, the impossible cylinder of Babylon 5. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood in the center of the circle, having delivered his report with characteristic precision. Now came the harder part. Defending his assessment against the Council's scrutiny. Most unusual, this station is, Yoda said, his ancient eyes narrowed in thought. Sense you did, something in the one called Delenn? Yes, Master, Obi-Wan replied. She's Force-sensitive, but untrained. And yet she demonstrates an understanding of the Force's nature that rivals our own teachings. She speaks of it as a Vorlon concept, whatever that means. Her people, the Minbari, seem to have developed their own Force philosophy entirely independent of Jedi or Sith tradition. Mace Windu leaned forward, his expression skeptical. A convenient claim for potential infiltrators. The Separatists could have fabricated this entire scenario. A displaced station full of unknown species, appearing near Republic space precisely when we're stretched thinnest. I considered that possibility, Master Windu, Obi-Wan said carefully. But their technology is genuinely alien. Our analysts have examined the sensor data from their station. The power generation, the artificial gravity system, their fighter craft, none of it matches Separatist or Republic design philosophies. And the diversity of species aboard defies any infiltration scenario I can imagine. Kit Fisto spoke, his tentacles swaying slightly. What of their military capabilities? You mentioned defense systems. Formidable enough to make a direct assault costly, Obi-Wan admitted. They have energy weapons, fighter squadrons, and defensive batteries that could hold off a modest fleet. But nothing that suggests offensive intent. Everything about the station's design suggests it was built for sustained habitation and diplomacy, not conquest. Yet diplomacy without allegiance is merely strategic positioning, Mace observed. In war, neutrality is a myth. Eventually, they'll have to choose a side. Obi-Wan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. With respect, Master, I believe that's precisely the assumption they're challenging. Captain Sheridan made it clear they've maintained neutrality through conflicts that, in his words, make our current war look minor. They believe deeply in the possibility of third options. Idealism, Mace said flatly. The Separatists will exploit that ruthlessly. Before Obi-Wan could respond, Yoda's ears twitched. And yet, Master Kenobi, believe them you do. Sense their sincerity, you did. It wasn't quite a question, but Obi-Wan answered anyway. Yes, Master. Ambassador Delenn in particular, there was something profoundly genuine about her. A spiritual clarity I've rarely encountered. A single honest diplomat does not a trustworthy station make, Mace countered. We need guarantees. Inspections. Assurances that their technology won't be weaponized against us. Such demands might drive them toward the Separatists, Obi-Wan warned. They've made it clear they value autonomy above all else. The council fell into contemplative silence. Finally, Yoda spoke. Visit this station, I will. Sense the truth of them myself, I must. Too important, this is, to rely on reports alone. Obi-Wan felt surprise ripple through the Force. Yoda rarely left the temple during wartime. That he would personally investigate Babylon 5 spoke to how seriously the council took this development. I will accompany you, Master Yoda, Obi-Wan offered. No, Mace interjected. You're needed on the Outer Rim offensive. We'll send Master Yoda with a full diplomatic escort. If this station is what it claims to be, we need to establish formal Republic protocols immediately. If it's a trap, he left the implication hanging. Trust in the Force, we must, Yoda said softly. But cautious, we will be. Halfway across the galaxy, in a meditation chamber aboard Babylon 5, Delenn sat in silence, her consciousness reaching out into the strange new energy field that permeated this universe. The Vorlons had taught her to touch what they called the beyond. The fundamental force that connected all living things. She had spent years learning to sense it, to understand its ebb and flow. But this force was different. Stronger, perhaps. Or simply more focused. In her own universe, the energy field was vast and diffuse, requiring great effort to perceive. Here, it practically sang through every living being, creating harmonies and discordances that told stories of light and darkness, peace and conflict. She sensed Obi-Wan Kenobi's report to his council as a distant ripple in the Force. Not the specific words, but the shape of concern, the weight of decisions being made. The Jedi Council was ancient and powerful, she could feel that much. They carried centuries of accumulated wisdom and the burden of guardianship. But they also carried arrogance. The certainty that their way was the only way. The assumption that Force sensitivity must inevitably lead to Jedi training or fall to darkness. The door chimed. Delenn opened her eyes to find Lenier standing in the entrance, his Minbari features composed in that expression of patient service that had defined their relationship for years. Delenn, he said quietly. Captain Sheridan requests your presence in the council chamber. We have received multiple transmissions. Multiple. The Republic has sent formal diplomatic overtures, Lenier explained as they walked through the corridors. But we have also received messages from something called the Separatist Alliance, the Hutt Cartel, and an organization identifying itself as the Mandalorian Protectors. It seems word of our arrival has spread quickly. Delenn felt a familiar sensation, the moment when simple first contact became complex political maneuvering. It was a pattern she'd seen dozens of times on Babylon 5. Every faction seeking advantage, every power block attempting to pull the newcomer into their orbit. We must be very careful, Lenier, she said. This galaxy is far more politically complex than we initially understood. The council chamber, Babylon 5's war room and strategic planning center, was already filled when they arrived. Sheridan stood at the head of the table, with Ivanova managing holographic displays showing the various incoming transmissions. Garibaldi leaned against the wall, looking tired. And around the table sat the other ambassadors. Carr with his penetrating stare, Londo Mollari resplendent in Centauri finery looking far too pleased with himself, and Veer Kodo taking nervous notes. Delenn, good, Sheridan said. We need your input on this. We've got 4 different factions all wanting to be our best friend, and I don't trust any of them. 5, actually, Londo corrected, waving a data crystal. The Techno Union just sent their regards and an invitation to discuss mutually beneficial technological exchanges. Though they were kind enough to include a thinly veiled threat about what happens to those who refuse their generosity. So, standard galactic politics, Carr observed dryly. How refreshing to discover that some things are universal across realities. Sheridan activated the first transmission. A holographic figure appeared, humanoid, aristocratic features, white hair and beard, wearing robes that suggested both wealth and authority. His voice was cultured, measured, and utterly cold. I am Count Dooku, leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. We have learned of your arrival and your proclaimed neutrality. The Confederacy respects sovereignty and the right of all peoples to self-determination, unlike the corrupt Republic that seeks to dominate all systems through military force. We offer friendship, trade agreements, and protection from Republic aggression. We ask only that you consider the truth of our cause. The transmission ended. Garibaldi snorted. Well, he doesn't lay it on thick at all. Actually, Delenn said slowly, he was remarkably honest in his own way. Everything he said was technically accurate from a certain point of view. The Republic does enforce compliance through military means. The Separatists do claim to value independence. But the subtext is that he wants to use us as a propaganda tool, Sheridan finished. A neutral station that just happens to validate the Separatist narrative. He shook his head. Next. Ivanova activated the second message. This one showed a massive slug-like creature, its eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. When it spoke, the translation came through in heavily accented Basic that suggested the translator was working overtime. Babylon Station, the Hutt rumbled. Jabba extends greetings. You find yourself in space the Hutts have long protected. Proper arrangements must be made. Docking fees. Security guarantees. Protection from those who would see you as prey. We are reasonable beings. We can reach. Accommodation. A protection racket, Garibaldi said flatly. I know that speech. I've given that speech to small business owners back on Earth. Except usually without the tail. The Hutts control significant criminal networks, Londo observed, examining his own data. They could provide resources the Republic and Separatists might not. Information, black market goods, access to neutral ports. Of course, they would also expect us to facilitate their various illegal enterprises in return. Hard pass, Sheridan said. Sheridan said. We didn't build Babylon 5 to become a criminal haven. Next. The third transmission showed armored figures, warriors whose very stance spoke of barely contained violence. The speaker's helmet bore distinctive markings, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. I am Fen Rao of the Mandalorian Protectors. We have heard of your station and your warriors. The Republic and the Separatists fight over philosophy and politics. We understand a simpler truth. Strength respects strength. You claim to stand neutral. We claim the same. Perhaps there is common ground between those who fight for themselves rather than for distant governments. The transmission ended. Carr leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Now that was interesting. Unlike the others, they offer nothing except recognition. No threats, no promises of protection. Simply acknowledgement that we exist and occupy a similar position. The Mandalorians are complicated, Ivanova said, pulling up reference data they'd extracted from captured transmissions. They're a warrior culture that's been through civil wars of their own. Some factions support the Republic, others remain neutral, and a few have thrown in with the Separatists. But they respect strength and honor above political allegiance. They might be useful allies, Carr suggested. Or at least, less likely to betray us than the others. Sheridan was about to respond when Ivanova held up a hand. Captain, we're receiving another transmission. This one's coming from. She paused, double-checking her readings. From Coruscant. Official Republic channels. It's marked as highest priority diplomatic communication. Put it through, Sheridan ordered. The hologram that appeared made even Londo sit up straighter. The figure was small, ancient, with pointed ears and eyes that had witnessed centuries of galactic history. He leaned on a gnarled walking stick, but there was nothing frail about his presence. The force seemed to concentrate around him like a visible aura. Captain Sheridan of Babylon 5, Yoda said, his voice carrying surprising strength. Master Yoda of the Jedi Council, I am. Come to your station, I wish to. Speak of many things, we must. Tomorrow, I will arrive. Prepared to receive me, will you be? The transmission ended before Sheridan could respond, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Well, Londo said eventually, I believe we've just been summoned by the galaxy's most powerful force user. How delightfully ominous. Delenn felt it again, that ripple in the force she'd sensed earlier. But now it was focused, intentional, directed at Babylon 5 like the gaze of some vast intelligence. Yoda wasn't simply coming to visit. He was coming to judge. To determine whether this impossible station represented opportunity or threat. "We need to be very careful," she said quietly. "Master Yoda is not like Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is ancient and powerful, and he will see through any deception in moments." "Then it's a good thing we're not planning to deceive him," Sheridan replied. But Delenn could hear the tension in his voice. They were about to undergo the most important diplomatic test Babylon 5 had ever faced, proving their worth to beings who had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. And they had less than 24 hours to prepare. "Ivanova, respond to Master Yoda's transmission," Sheridan ordered. "Tell him we'll be honored to receive him and the Jedi Council. Full diplomatic protocols. Garibaldi, I want security on high alert but completely non-threatening. If the Jedi sense paranoia, they'll assume we have something to hide." "What about the other transmissions?" Carr asked. "Dooku, the Hutts, the Mandalorians." Sheridan thought for a moment. "Send polite acknowledgements to all of them. Thank them for their interest. Tell them we're currently establishing formal diplomatic relations with the Republic, and once those are complete, we'll be happy to hear their proposals in detail." Stalling, Londo observed approvingly. "Very wise. Let them wonder about our allegiances while we determine the actual balance of power." Delenn watched Sheridan give orders, watched the others move to execute them, and felt a familiar mixture of hope and apprehension. They had survived first contact. They had survived the initial political probes. Now came the real test. Tomorrow, one of the galaxy's most powerful Force users would walk their corridors. And the future of Babylon 5 in this strange new universe would be decided by whether they could convince an ancient Jedi Master that neutrality wasn't just possible, it was necessary. She retired to her quarters that evening and meditated deeply, reaching out through the Force to touch the approaching presence of Yoda. What she felt made her both hopeful and afraid. The Jedi Master was powerful beyond her understanding, wise beyond her years, and committed to principles that had guided the galaxy for millennia. But he was also burdened. Carrying secrets. Fighting a war that she sensed went deeper than the simple Republic-Separatist conflict suggested. And somewhere in the shadows of that war, she felt something else. Something dark and patient and utterly ruthless, watching Babylon 5's arrival with interest that felt like hunger. She opened her eyes and spoke softly to the empty room. "We have come to a galaxy at war with itself. And I fear we have arrived at precisely the moment when that war will demand we choose sides, whether we wish to or not." In the silence that followed, she could have sworn she heard distant laughter, dark and knowing, echoing through the Force from somewhere far away. Master Yoda's shuttle arrived with an escort of Republic fighters that peeled away once the Jedi's craft entered Babylon 5's docking perimeter. Sheridan watched from the observation dome as the elegant vessel settled into Bay 9 with practiced precision. No unnecessary theatrics. No show of force. Just quiet competence that somehow felt more intimidating than any military display. "He's alone," Garibaldi reported, monitoring the security feeds. "No clone escort. No other Jedi. Just him and a pilot droid. Either supreme confidence or a gesture of trust," Ivanova observed. "Or both," Delenn said quietly. She stood slightly apart from the others, her bone crest catching the light, her hands folded in that meditation posture she adopted when reaching out through the Force. "He is remarkable. I can feel his presence from here. Like standing near a star." Sheridan adjusted his uniform and checked his appearance one final time. First impressions mattered, even. Especially, when meeting beings who could read emotions through mystical energy fields. "All right, people. Standard diplomatic protocol. Let's show Master Yoda that Babylon 5 is exactly what we claim to be." The docking bay had been prepared with care. No weapons visible, but Sheridan knew Garibaldi had security stationed at every access point. Atmosphere had been tested 3 times. A small honor guard stood at attention. Humans, Minbari, Narn, even one Centauri who Londo had insisted would add appropriate gravitas. When the airlock opened, the figure that emerged was smaller than Sheridan expected but carried a presence that filled the entire bay. Yoda moved with the aid of his Jimmer stick, his ancient eyes sweeping across the assembled delegation with an intensity that suggested he was seeing far more than physical appearances. "Captain Sheridan," Yoda said, his voice carrying surprising strength. "Gracious of you to receive me, it is. Long has the journey been, and much to discuss, there is." Sheridan stepped forward, bowing slightly in a gesture of respect. "Master Yoda, Babylon 5 is honored by your presence. We've prepared quarters for you and arranged for whatever accommodations you might require." "Unnecessary, such formality is," Yoda replied, but Sheridan caught the faint approval in his tone. "Come to understand, I have. To see with my own eyes, to feel through the Force, the truth of this place." His gaze shifted to Delenn, and something changed in his expression. Ancient recognition meeting something equally profound. "Ambassador Delenn. Sense you, I did, even from Coruscant. Unusual, you are. Touch the Force, you do, but walk a different path." Delenn bowed in the Minbari fashion, a graceful lowering of her head and shoulders. "Master Yoda, I am honored to meet one who has achieved such harmony with what you call the Force. My people have sought similar understanding through what we know as the calling of the Vorlons and the teachings of Valen." "Vorlons? Valen?" Yoda's ears twitched with interest. "Much to learn from each other, we may have. But first," he turned, his gaze sweeping the docking bay once more. "Tour this station, I would. See how different peoples live together in peace, I must. Judge with my own senses, the truth of your claims." "Of course," Sheridan said. "I'll escort you personally." As they walked through Babylon 5's corridors, Sheridan watched Yoda's reactions carefully. The Jedi Master moved slowly, but his eyes missed nothing. He paused when they passed a group of human dock workers sharing a meal with Narn laborers, watched as a Minbari priest offered a blessing to a human child, observed the casual integration that had become second nature to the station's inhabitants. "Remarkable," Yoda murmured. "Achieve this, how did you?" "In the Republic, cooperation we have, yes. But separation remains. Districts for different species. Cultural enclaves. Natural, it seems. Yet here we don't have the luxury of separation," Sheridan explained. "When you're confined to 5 miles of station, you either learn to see your neighbors as people rather than aliens, or you tear each other apart. We chose the former. It wasn't easy. We had riots in the early days. Murders based on species prejudice. Religious conflicts that nearly destroyed the station. Yet overcame them, you did." "We had help," Delenn interjected. "Leaders from each species who believed that the future could be different from the past. Who were willing to sacrifice comfort and tradition for the possibility of peace." They entered the Zocalo, and Yoda stopped completely. The marketplace bustled with activity, vendors from a dozen species hawking goods, children of mixed backgrounds playing together, the constant exchange of commerce and conversation creating a tapestry of organized chaos. Yoda closed his eyes, his breathing deepening. Sheridan recognized the posture from watching Delenn meditate. The Jedi Master was sensing the Force, feeling the currents of life flowing through Babylon 5. "Balance," Yoda said softly, opening his eyes. "Expected discord, I did. Conflict arising from such diversity. But instead, balance. Fragile, perhaps. Maintained through constant effort. But real nonetheless." He turned to Delenn. "You're doing, this is." "Not mine alone," Delenn replied. "But yes, I have worked to maintain what the Vorlons taught, that all life is connected, that separation is illusion, that understanding can bridge any divide." "Vorlons again," Yoda said. "Tell me of them, you will. But first, He gestured toward a quieter corridor. Speak privately, we must. Matters of the Force, not for all ears. Sheridan led them to one of Babylon 5's meditation gardens. A small green space maintained by the Minbari as a sanctuary from the metal and machinery of station life. Water trickled through a carefully designed rock arrangement. Soft bioluminescent plants provided gentle illumination. It was one of Delenn's favorite places, and Sheridan suspected she'd suggested it precisely because it resonated with Force-sensitive individuals. Yoda settled onto a meditation cushion with surprising grace for someone his age. Delenn sat across from him in formal Minbari posture. Sheridan remained standing, unsure if this conversation required his presence. Stay, Captain, Yoda said without opening his eyes. Concerns you, this does. Leader of this station, you are. Right to hear this, you have. Hear what, Master Yoda? Sheridan asked. The ancient Jedi opened his eyes, and Sheridan saw something he hadn't expected, uncertainty. Perhaps even fear. A war, the Republic fights, Yoda began. Against Separatists, we tell ourselves. Against those who would destroy democracy and peace. But sense something deeper, I do. Something darker at work. Manipulation. Schemes within schemes. And since your arrival, felt a disturbance, I have. As if the Force itself recognizes something significant in your presence. We're not warriors, Sheridan said carefully. We're diplomats. Yet war, you have seen, Yoda replied. Feel it in you, I do. Scars in the Force. Battles fought. Terrible choices made. Commander you may be, Captain Sheridan, but warrior you are also. Sheridan felt exposed, as if Yoda could read every classified mission, every impossible decision, every moment when he'd been forced to choose between bad options and worse ones. I've done what I had to do, he said quietly. Yes, Yoda agreed. And this, the Jedi Council must understand. Claim neutrality, you do. But tested, neutrality will be. When Separatists come, and come they will, offer you aid, they will. Protection. Technology. Ask only that turn blind eye, you do, to certain activities. We won't, Sheridan said firmly. Know this, I do, Yoda replied. Feel your conviction, I can. But ask yourself, what if lives depend on it? What if refusing Separatist aid means death for thousands aboard this station? Maintain neutrality then, will you? It was the question Sheridan had been avoiding since they arrived. The comfortable assumption that they could somehow remain apart from this galaxy's conflicts was naive. Eventually, someone would force them to choose. The only question was what form that forcing would take. Before he could answer, Delenn spoke. Master Yoda, you speak of darkness at work. Of manipulation deeper than the obvious war. Tell me, do you sense something similar to what my people call the shadows? Yoda's attention snapped to her with laser focus. Shadows? Explain. Delenn's expression grew distant, haunted. In our universe, there were ancient races. The Vorlons represented one philosophy, order through guidance, evolution through subtle influence. The shadows represented the opposite, chaos through conflict, evolution through warfare. They manipulated younger races for eons, turning us against each other to test and strengthen us. We thought we had defeated them, driven them beyond the rim. But their philosophy survived. The belief that conflict is the only path to growth. And sense this here, you do? Yoda asked sharply. I sense, intention, Delenn said carefully. This war of yours feels orchestrated. Both sides convinced of their righteousness. Both sides manipulated by forces they cannot see. It is eerily familiar. Yoda was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried centuries of weariness. Right, you may be. Long has the Jedi Order searched for the Sith, ancient enemies who manipulate the dark side of the Force. Extinct, we believed them. But since their presence, I have. Growing stronger. And with your arrival, interested they will be. Why? Sheridan demanded. We're not part of your Force politics. We're refugees, not players in your ancient conflicts. Unknown, you are, Yoda explained. Unpredictable. Outside the Sith's plans and manipulations. Such things, enemies of order they become. Either destroy you, the Sith will, or corrupt you. Use your neutrality as weapon against the Jedi. No middle ground exists in their philosophy. Then we'll create one, Sheridan said. It's what we do. Yoda studied him for a long moment, then something shifted in the ancient Jedi's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps respect. Bold words. Proven, they must be. And proof, Captain Sheridan, may cost more than you imagine. A chime interrupted them. Garibaldi's voice came through Sheridan's link, urgent but controlled. Captain, we've got incoming. A Separatist delegation just dropped out of hyperspace. They're requesting permission to dock and, quote, discuss matters of mutual interest with the station's leadership. They're being very polite about it, but they've got a Providence-class destroyer sitting out there backing up the request. Sheridan met Yoda's eyes and saw grim understanding there. The theoretical had just become very real. The Separatists had arrived, and with them came the first true test of Babylon 5's proclaimed neutrality. Tell them we'll receive their delegation, Sheridan said. Standard diplomatic protocols. But make it clear that we're also receiving Master Yoda as the Republic's representative. Both sides get equal treatment. Understood, Garibaldi replied. After he signed off, Sheridan turned back to Yoda. You were saying something about maintaining neutrality being difficult. Yoda's expression was almost amused. Tested sooner than expected, you will be. See how you navigate this, I am curious to. Receive Dooku, will you? Knowing what I have told you about the Sith. I'll receive him as I would any diplomatic representative, Sheridan replied. With respect, caution, and absolutely no illusions about his motives. And Master Yoda. You're welcome to attend the meeting. Let's establish right now that Babylon 5 practices transparency in its diplomatic relations. Bold, Yoda observed. Foolish, perhaps. But bold nonetheless. He stood, leaning on his Jimmer stick. Attend, I will. Sense Dooku's intentions through the Force, I can. Warn you, if necessary. As they left the meditation garden, Delenn moved close to Sheridan and spoke quietly. John, be very careful. Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He understands their ways, their strengths, their weaknesses. And if Master Yoda is correct about the Sith's interest in us. I know, Sheridan replied. We've just become a prize in a game we don't fully understand. But Delenn, we've played this game before. Different players, same dynamics. We just need to remember who we are and what we stand for. Faith manages, Delenn said softly, using the phrase that had become Sheridan's personal mantra through impossible situations. Faith manages, he agreed. But as they prepared to receive Count Dooku, former Jedi, Separatist leader, and quite possibly a Sith Lord, Sheridan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being maneuvered into a position where faith alone wouldn't be enough. Somewhere in the galaxy, forces beyond their understanding had taken notice of Babylon 5. And those forces were about to test whether neutrality was a principle worth dying for. Count Dooku arrived with considerably more theater than Master Yoda. His shuttle was flanked by vulture droids flying in precise formation, and the destroyer Invisible Hand maintained a distance that was technically non-threatening but close enough to make a point. Sheridan watched the approach from CNC, comparing the two Jedi, former Jedi, he corrected himself, and noting the differences. Where Yoda had come alone as a gesture of trust, Dooku came with an entourage. Where Yoda had been content with simple accommodations, Dooku's transmission had included specific requirements for his quarters. It was political theater, carefully calculated to project power and refinement. Compensating for something, Garibaldi muttered, watching the ornate shuttle settle into the docking bay. Or establishing his importance, Ivanova countered. Republic citizens see the Jedi as humble monks. Dooku needs to project himself as something more, a leader, a statesman. Different audience, different presentation. Sheridan considered this as he headed to the docking bay. Delenn and Yoda accompanied him, the ancient Jedi Master having agreed to this unprecedented joint reception. Kar and Londo also joined them, the Narn because his political instinct sensed opportunity, the Centauri because he refused to be left out of anything potentially significant. The airlock opened, and Count Dooku emerged with the bearing of aristocracy. He was tall, elegant, his white hair and beard immaculately groomed, his robe suggesting wealth and taste. Unlike Yoda's simple Jedi garb, Dooku wore layers of fine fabric that managed to appear both monastic and regal. His eyes swept the reception party and settled immediately on Yoda. Something complicated flickered across his face, respect, perhaps, or memory of a relationship that had ended badly. Master Yoda, Dooku said, his voice cultured and controlled. I did not expect to find you here. The Council must consider this station remarkably important to spare you from the war effort. Important indeed, Count Dooku, Yoda replied evenly. As recognized by you as well, if interrupt your campaigns, you did, to visit personally. Dooku's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Touché, old friend. He turned to Sheridan and executed a slight bow that managed to convey both courtesy and subtle condescension. Captain Sheridan, I presume. I am Count Dooku of Sereno, leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. I come to welcome Babylon 5 to the galactic community and to offer the friendship of free world standing against tyranny. Welcome to Babylon 5, Count Dooku, Sheridan replied, refusing to rise to the implicit challenge in Dooku's words. We've prepared a conference room where we can discuss matters of mutual interest. If you'll follow me. As they walked through the station's corridors, Sheridan noticed how Dooku observed everything with the same penetrating attention as Yoda, but with a different quality. Where Yoda had seemed to sense the emotional and spiritual currents, Dooku appeared to be conducting a tactical assessment. His eyes tracked security positions, structural vulnerabilities, population density. Londo, walking slightly behind, leaned close to Kar and whispered loudly enough for Sheridan to hear, now there is a man who understands power. Notice the way he moves, like a predator cataloging prey. Indeed, Kar replied quietly. He reminds me of certain Centauri nobility. All civilized manners concealing utter ruthlessness. You wound me, Kar, Londo said without any real offense. The conference room had been arranged with careful neutrality. Sheridan took the head of the table. Dooku sat to his right, Yoda to his left. Delenn positioned herself where she could observe both Force users, while Garibaldi stood near the door in his familiar security stance. Kar and Londo occupied opposite sides, maintaining their habitual mutual suspicion. Let me be direct, Captain Sheridan, Dooku began once they were settled. The Republic will tell you they fight for democracy and peace. In truth, they fight to maintain a corrupt system that has failed the majority of the galaxy's citizens. The Separatist alliance represents worlds that choose self-determination over servitude to Coruscant's ineffective bureaucracy. And achieves this through droid armies and military conquest. Sheridan asked mildly. We defend ourselves against Republic aggression, Dooku countered smoothly. The clone army was created in secret, without Senate authorization, specifically to crush our legitimate political movement. We did not start this war, Captain. We merely refused to surrender to tyranny. Yoda's ears twitched. Convenient narrative, this is. Mention not, you do, the corporations that fund your confederacy. The Trade Federation, the Banking Clan, the Techno Union. Profit, they seek. Independence, merely the excuse. And the Republic's clone army was purchased from whom? Dooku shot back. Commissioned by whom? The Kaminoans don't work cheaply, old friend. Someone paid for that army. Someone prepared for this war years in advance. Yet the Council asks no questions about this convenient military force appearing precisely when needed. Sheridan watched the exchange with growing understanding. Both men were telling partial truths. The Republic clearly had deeper issues than it wanted to admit. But Dooku's Separatist alliance was equally compromised by the corporations funding it. Gentlemen, Sheridan interrupted, I appreciate the political philosophy lesson, but let's address the actual situation. You're both here because you want Babylon 5 to choose your side. Or at minimum, to stay out of your enemy's orbit. Yes. Dooku regarded him with new interest. Refreshingly blunt. Very well, Captain. The Confederacy offers Babylon 5 full recognition as a sovereign entity. We will guarantee your neutrality, provide technology to repair your damaged systems, and offer access to our trade networks. We ask only that you remain genuinely neutral, not the false neutrality of Republic apologists. And the Republic's offer? Sheridan asked, turning to Yoda. Protection, we offer, Yoda said simply. From those who would exploit your vulnerability. Access to Republic resources and knowledge. Membership in a galactic community millennia old. Ask for allegiance, we do not. But trust, we must establish. Trust, Dooku said, his tone sardonic. The Republic trusts no one. They'll want observers aboard your station. Access to your technology. Intelligence sharing agreements. Before long, you'll be a Republic outpost in all but name. While the Separatists would respect our neutrality out of pure philosophical commitment? Sheridan asked skeptically. Dooku's smile was thin. We would respect your neutrality because it serves our purposes. I prefer honest self-interest to hypocritical altruism, Captain. The Separatists need neutral stations where negotiations can occur, where intelligence can be gathered, where unofficial contacts can be maintained. Babylon 5 could serve that function, profitably and safely. You're describing a spy haven, Garibaldi interjected from his position by the door. I'm describing pragmatic diplomacy, Dooku corrected. Every neutral station in the galaxy serves multiple purposes. The question is whether Babylon 5 does so openly and honestly, or whether it pretends to moral purity while inevitably being compromised by one faction or another. Delenn spoke for the first time, her voice carrying that quality of spiritual certainty that Sheridan had learned to trust. Count Dooku, you speak of pragmatism and self-interest. But I sense something else in you. Certainty. The absolute conviction that your path is correct and all others are deluded. Master Yoda has told us of the Sith, ancient enemies of the Jedi who deal in absolutes. Your philosophy sounds remarkably similar. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dooku's expression didn't change, but Sheridan saw his hand move almost imperceptibly toward the curved lightsaber hilt at his belt. Careful with your accusations, Ambassador, Dooku said softly. The Sith are extinct. The Jedi Council's ancient enemies exist only in their paranoid fantasies. And yet Master Yoda has sensed their presence, Delenn pressed. Growing stronger. Manipulating events. Tell me, Count Dooku, do you serve the Separatist cause, or does the Separatist cause serve something darker? Yoda's eyes were closed, but Sheridan could sense the old Jedi's attention was focused entirely on Dooku. The force rippled through the room like a physical presence, the pressure of two powerful wills testing each other. You overstep, Ambassador, Dooku said, and now there was an edge of genuine threat in his voice. I came here to offer friendship. But I will not tolerate baseless. Enough, Sheridan said, his command voice cutting through the tension. This isn't productive. Count Dooku, Ambassador Delenn has the right to ask difficult questions. You have the right to refuse to answer. But let's be very clear about where we stand. He stood, placing his hands on the table and meeting both Force users' eyes in turn. Babylon 5 was created to be neutral ground. A place where even bitter enemies could meet and talk without fear of betrayal or violence. We've maintained that neutrality through civil wars, assassination attempts, and conflicts that threaten to destroy entire species. We will maintain it here. Admirable sentiment, Dooku said coolly. But in practice... In practice, Sheridan continued, it means we'll receive diplomatic missions from both Republic and Separatists. We'll provide neutral meeting space if you choose to negotiate. We'll trade with anyone who approaches us honestly. And we will defend ourselves against anyone, who tries to compromise that neutrality through force or manipulation. Bold words from someone with a damaged station and no way home, Dooku observed. Londo chose that moment to laugh, a sharp, barking sound that drew everyone's attention. Count Dooku, if I may offer insight from someone who has watched Captain Sheridan operate. He once faced down the entire Centauri Republic with nothing but a damaged white star and absolute conviction. He has stared down ancient races who could obliterate planets with a thought. Do not mistake his diplomatic courtesy for weakness. The Centauri speaks truth, Carr added, and the fact that he was agreeing with Londo seemed to emphasize the point more than words alone could. This station has survived things your imagination cannot encompass. We have been to the edge of annihilation and beyond. Your war, vast as it seems to you, is merely another test of principles we have already proven. Dooku studied them all for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, smoothing his robes. I see that Babylon 5 will indeed be interesting. Very well, Captain Sheridan. I accept your terms. The Confederacy will respect your neutrality and will approach you as honest brokers. But understand. Neutrality in wartime is a precarious position. Forces beyond your control may determine your fate regardless of your intentions. Is that a threat? Garibaldi asked, his hand moving to his PPG. It's a reality, Dooku replied. This galaxy is in flux. The old order is dying. What emerges from the chaos will reshape everything. Your station may become a beacon of hope or a cautionary tale. The choice, ultimately, may not be yours to make. He turned to Yoda, and something passed between them. Old friendship, perhaps, or old regret. Master, I hope the Council realizes what you've walked into here. This station represents something neither of us anticipated. Something that could change the balance we've maintained. Change, the Force wills, Yoda replied softly. Accept it, we must. Control it, we cannot. How very Jedi of you, Dooku said with a hint of old affection beneath the sarcasm. Captain Sheridan, I will leave technical specialists to discuss trade arrangements and communication protocols. But I suspect we'll speak again soon. This galaxy has a way of forcing interesting choices upon those who wish to remain apart from its conflicts. After Dooku departed with his entourage, the room remained silent for several heartbeats. Finally, Garibaldi exhaled slowly. Well, that was tense. Anyone else feel like we just got evaluated by a very sophisticated predator? He is Sith, Yoda said quietly, confirming what Delenn had suspected. Or apprentice to one. Certain, I am not which. But dark side, strong in him it is. Conceals it well, but feel it, I did. And you let him leave? Sheridan asked. Proof, I have not, Yoda replied. And more importantly, learn from his presence, we can. Follow him, I will not. But watch him, yes. See what moves he makes, what patterns emerge. Delenn looked troubled. This is like the Shadow War all over again. Ancient forces manipulating younger races toward conflict. Using us as pieces in games we barely understand. Then we do what we did before, Sheridan said firmly. We refuse to play by their rules. We create our own path. Babylon 5 stood for that principle in our universe. It will stand for it here. Carr rose from his seat, his expression thoughtful. Captain, I have fought wars of liberation. I have seen my people enslaved and my world occupied. I understand the appeal of both Republic and Separatist philosophies. But I also understand that wars between great powers are never truly about the ideals they proclaim. They are about control. About who gets to shape the future. Your point? Sheridan asked. My point is that by declaring neutrality, we have not removed ourselves from the conflict. We have declared ourselves a prize to be won or denied to the enemy. Both sides will test us. Push us. Try to compromise us through 1,000 subtle means. The question is not whether we can remain neutral. The question is whether we can survive the pressure of maintaining neutrality. Londo nodded slowly. For once, Carr and I agree completely. Though I would add, we have one advantage. Both sides currently believe they can win us to their cause. As long as they believe that, they will court us rather than destroy us. The danger comes when one side decides we cannot be won and must therefore be eliminated. Then we make sure that never happens, Sheridan said. We become valuable enough to both sides that destroying us is unthinkable. We make Babylon 5 essential to this galaxy's diplomatic infrastructure. Yoda looked at him with those ancient eyes, and Sheridan couldn't tell if the expression was approval or concern. Dangerous game, this is. Play it well, you must. For if fail you do, consequences will extend far beyond this station. Master Yoda, Sheridan said carefully, you came here to judge us. To determine if we're a threat to the Republic. So I'm asking directly, what's your assessment? Can Babylon 5 maintain genuine neutrality in your war? Or are we deluding ourselves? The Jedi Master was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant as if consulting the Force itself. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of prophecy. Possible, it is, he said slowly. But easy, it will not be. Dark times ahead, I sense. Choices that will test everything you believe. And influence, your presence will have. Already, ripples in the Force, I feel. Babylon 5's arrival has changed something fundamental. Whether for good or ill, even I cannot see. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One warning, Captain Sheridan. Dooku spoke truth when he said forces beyond your control may determine your fate. But remember, even the smallest choice can alter the course of the galaxy. In the end, choices matter more than power. May the Force guide you in making them wisely. After Yoda departed, Sheridan stood alone at the conference room viewport, looking out at the unfamiliar stars. Delenn joined him, her presence comforting in its familiarity. We're in over our heads, he said quietly. Yes, she agreed. But that has never stopped us before. This feels different, Delenn. In our universe, we understood the players. The Vorlons, the Shadows, even the Minbari and the Centauri. Here, we're blind. Ancient Force users playing games that span millennia. Sith Lords hiding in shadows. Wars built on manipulation so deep that even the Jedi Council can't see the truth. Then we bring clarity, Delenn said simply. That is what Babylon 5 has always done. We illuminate the darkness. We ask the questions others fear to voice. We stand as proof that there are alternatives to endless conflict. Sheridan pulled her close, finding strength in her certainty. Faith manages. Faith manages, she confirmed. But as they stood together watching the stars, neither could shake the feeling that they had just committed Babylon 5 to a course that would test their faith, and their survival, beyond anything they had faced before. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Sith Lord Darth Sidious sat in meditation, sensing the ripples Yoda had mentioned. This impossible station and its inhabitants represented an element he had not foreseen. An unpredictable variable in plans that had taken decades to arrange. For now, he would watch. Learn. Determine whether Babylon 5 was a threat to be eliminated or a tool to be used. Either way, the station's fate was already being written in the shadows of the Force. 3 weeks after the Dooku incident, Babylon 5 had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Republic ships docked alongside Separatist vessels, both sides maintaining frigid courtesy while their intelligence operatives attempted to recruit station personnel. Yoda had departed but left behind a small Jedi consular staff led by a young Togruta named Ahsoka Tano. The Separatists established a permanent embassy under a diplomatic attaché who everyone knew reported directly to Dooku. Sheridan stood in CNC reviewing the week's incident reports. Fights between Republic and Separatist sympathizers. Attempted espionage. 2 assassination plots foiled by Garibaldi's increasingly paranoid security measures. The neutrality they'd proclaimed was holding, but barely. Captain Ivanova called from her station, "We're receiving a priority transmission." Source is, interesting. They're identifying themselves as representatives of the Hutt Cartel. And they're requesting immediate audience with station leadership. Again. Garibaldi's voice came through the comm, "That's the 3rd time this month. What part of 'we're not interested in criminal partnerships' don't they understand?" "The part where we need resources and they have them," Sheridan replied. "All right, tell them I'll receive their representatives. But make it clear this is a preliminary discussion only." "Captain," Ivanova said hesitantly, "there's more." The transmission originated from a ship that just dropped out of hyperspace. It's big. Hutt pleasure barge class, but heavily modified. And it's not alone, 6 escort vessels, all armed. Sheridan felt that familiar tension between his shoulder blades that signaled complications. Why would the Hutts send a fleet to make a diplomatic overture? Perhaps, Londo's voice interjected as he swept into CNC with typical Centauri grandiosity, because they are not making an overture. They are making a statement. "We are here, we are powerful, and you will negotiate with us." I recognize the tactic. We Centauri invented it. Before Sheridan could respond, alarms blared across the station. Ivanova's hands flew across her console. "Captain, we have multiple hyperspace jump points opening. Mandalorian signatures. 6, no, 8 vessels. They're moving to intercept the Hutt ships." "Intercept?" Sheridan demanded. "Garibaldi, what the hell is going on in my space?" The security chief's voice was tight. "Apparently the Mandalorians and Hutts have territorial disputes that predate the Clone Wars by centuries. And we just became the contested ground." Through the viewport, Sheridan watched the 2 fleets maneuvering. The Hutt vessels were massive and slow, bristling with weapons that screamed criminal excess. The Mandalorian ships were sleeker, faster, moving with the precision of career warriors. Neither showed any sign of backing down. "Open a channel to both fleets," Sheridan ordered. "All frequencies." "Channel open," Ivanova confirmed. "This is Captain John Sheridan, commanding officer of Babylon 5. To all vessels within range, you are in neutral space under the protection of this station. Any hostile action will be considered an attack on Babylon 5 itself and will be met with appropriate force. Stand down immediately and request docking clearance through proper channels, or leave this sector. You have 30 seconds to comply." The comm crackled. A voice thick with Hutt accent replied, "Babylon Station. Gardulla the Hutt extends greetings. We come in peace, but the Mandalorians have pursued us in violation of established territorial boundaries. We claim right of sanctuary." A different voice responded, human, female, carrying absolute authority. "This is Bo-Katan Cries of Mandalore. The Hutts have abducted Mandalorian citizens for their slave pits. We claim right of pursuit and demand their surrender for trial." "Neither of you," Sheridan said evenly, "has any rights in this sector except those we grant. And right now, I'm granting you the right to back off before this escalates into something nobody wants. With respect, Captain Sheridan, Bo-Katan replied, you're new to this galaxy. The Hutts have operated with impunity for millennia. Someone needs to stand against them. Perhaps, Sheridan acknowledged, but not here. Not now. Not in neutral space where a firefight could kill thousands of civilians from dozens of species. Silence on the comm. Then Gardulla's voice again, calculatingly reasonable. Captain Sheridan makes valid point. Gardulla withdraws claim of sanctuary. Will depart peacefully. But first, must speak with station leadership. Urgent matter. No tricks, no weapons. Just business discussion. And after you speak with them, Bo-Katan cut in, the Mandalorians also request audience. We have proposition for your station. Alliance that could benefit both our peoples. Londo leaned close to Sheridan and whispered, you realize they are both maneuvering you into a position where refusing one means offending a major power? I'm aware, Sheridan replied quietly. Then, to the comm, both delegations will be received. Separately. With full security protocols. Any attempt at violence aboard this station will result in immediate expulsion and permanent docking ban. Clear. Clear, both voices responded, though neither sounded entirely pleased. An hour later, Sheridan found himself in the ambassadorial receiving room facing one of the most bizarre diplomatic situations of his career. Gardulla the Hutt occupied a repulsor platform that took up a quarter of the room, her massive bulk draped in what passed for Hutt finery. Her translator droid stood beside her, and flanking them were two bodyguards who looked like they could tear a bulkhead apart with their bare hands. Carr, Delenn, and Garibaldi sat with Sheridan. Londo had excused himself, claiming that Centauri-Hutt relations were complicated by historical incidents best left unexamined. Babylon Station, Gardulla began through her translator, is impressive. Neutral ground is rare in this galaxy. Rarer still is station that can enforce neutrality against competing powers. This, Gardulla respects. Thank you, Sheridan said carefully. What brings you here, Gardulla? Besides running from Mandalorians? The Hutt's laugh was a deep rumble that shook the furniture. Mandalorians see insult where no insult intended. Some citizens of Mandalore sold themselves into service contracts. Legal transactions. Mandalorians claim slavery. Gardulla claims employment. Perspective differences. Slavery by any name is still slavery, Delenn said quietly, her voice carrying that edge of Minbari moral certainty. Gardulla's eyes, small and calculating in her massive head, fixed on Delenn. Ambassador speaks from philosophical position. Admirable. Impractical, but admirable. In real galaxy, beings need work. Hutts provide work. Food, shelter, protection in exchange for service. Some contracts more binding than others. Get to the point, Garibaldi said bluntly. What do you want from us? Babylon 5 needs resources, Gardulla replied. Fuel. Raw materials. Technology to repair damaged systems. Also needs information. Where safe to trade, which systems neutral, which controlled by Republic or Separatists. Gardulla can provide all these things. In exchange for? Sheridan asked. Docking rights. Warehouse space. Certain discretions regarding cargo manifests. And most important, station remains neutral. Becomes place where business can be conducted away from Republic regulations and Separatist revolutionary fervor. Stable ground in unstable galaxy. You want to use Babylon 5 as a criminal hub, Sheridan said flatly. Captain Sheridan uses harsh word. Gardulla prefers free trade zone. Republic has too many regulations. Taxes too high. Mandates too restrictive. Beings need place to conduct business without bureaucratic interference. Your station could be that place. Carr leaned forward, his red eyes intent. And if we refuse? What then? Gardulla was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, the translator's voice remained neutral, but threat layered beneath the words. Then Babylon 5 finds resources difficult to obtain. Information becomes unreliable. Ships that would dock here are discouraged by accident and misfortune. Station that cannot sustain itself becomes station that fails. Gardulla would regret this outcome. But Galaxy is harsh place for those without powerful friends. The naked threat hung in the air. Sheridan felt his jaw tighten, felt the old anger rising, the same fury he'd felt facing down-Earth Alliance bureaucrats who tried to control Babylon 5 through resource manipulation. Before he could respond, Delenn spoke, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Gardulla the Hutt, I have lived through the fall of empires. I have watched ancient races that believed themselves eternal fade into memory. Your criminal enterprise has survived for centuries through intimidation and exploitation. But understand this, Babylon 5 has faced down beings who could obliterate planets with a thought. Your threats, while noted, are not particularly frightening. Gardulla's eyes narrowed. Bold words from refugees. Proven words from survivors, Carr added. We Narn understand occupation and slavery better than most. We fought a century-long war for our freedom against beings far more powerful than your cartel. We will not submit to new masters simply because the stars have changed. Sheridan stood, signaling the meeting's end. Gardulla, I'll be direct. We're not interested in becoming a criminal haven. But we are interested in legitimate trade. If you want to do business with Babylon 5, you'll follow our rules. No slavery. No smuggling of weapons or sentient beings. Full cargo manifests, full inspections. In exchange, we'll offer fair docking fees and access to our commercial sector. These terms unacceptable, the translator said flatly. Then we have nothing more to discuss, Sheridan replied. You're welcome to dock for supplies and leave. But if you attempt to conduct illegal operations from this station, you'll find we have teeth. Gardulla regarded him for a long moment, then rumbled something that the translator rendered as amused respect. Captain Sheridan reminds Gardulla of few others who stood against Hutt power. Most now dead. Some survived by learning flexibility. We shall see which category you fall into. The massive Hutt departed on her repulsor platform, bodyguards following. After they left, Garibaldi exhaled slowly. Well, we just made an enemy of one of the galaxy's most powerful criminal organizations. That went well. We made an enemy the moment we declared neutrality, Sheridan replied. The Hutts want chaos and corruption. We represent order and accountability. There was never going to be a middle ground. John, Delenn said quietly, Gardulla was not lying about our need for resources. We have 3 weeks of fuel reserves. Our supply lines from our universe are severed. If we cannot establish trade relationships. I know, Sheridan said. But we don't build Babylon 5's future on criminal foundations. We'll find another way. A chime from the door interrupted them. Garibaldi checked his security monitor and raised an eyebrow. Speaking of other ways, the Mandalorian delegation is here. And Captain, I think you're going to find this meeting very different. Bo-Katan Kryze entered without bodyguards, though she was armored head to toe in Beskar that gleamed under the station's lights. Her helmet was removed, revealing a woman perhaps in her 40s with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much combat. She carried herself like a warrior who'd earned every scar. Behind her came 2 other Mandalorians, one male, one female, both armored similarly. They moved with the unconscious synchronization of people who'd fought side by side for years. Captain Sheridan, Bo-Katan said, her voice direct and unadorned by diplomatic niceties. Thank you for receiving us. I'll be blunt. We came here tracking Hutt slavers. But what we found is more interesting. A station that stood down both a Hutt fleet and Mandalorian warships without firing a shot. That takes either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity. Sometimes, Sheridan replied with a slight smile, the line between those two is thinner than you'd think. Please, sit. Though I imagine sitting in full armor is uncomfortable. Comfort is for those without enemies, Bo-Katan replied, but she sat. I've researched your station, Captain. Republic and Separatist delegations both claim you'll eventually join their side. The Hutts think you'll become their puppet through economic pressure. They're all wrong, aren't they? We intend to remain neutral, Sheridan confirmed. Good, Bo-Katan said. Because Mandalore understands neutrality. We've maintained it through the Clone Wars despite pressure from all sides. The Republic wants our warriors. The Separatists want our weapons technology. We've refused both, because Mandalorians fight for Mandalore, not for distant politicians and their philosophical wars. That sounds familiar, Carr observed. Replace Mandalore with Babylon 5 and the principle is identical. Bo-Katan nodded. Exactly. Which is why I'm here with a proposal. An alliance between Babylon 5 and Mandalore. Not a military alliance, neither of us wants that. But a mutual understanding. You need resources, protection, and most importantly, you need a reputation that warns off predators like the Hutts. We can provide all three. In exchange for what? Sheridan asked. A neutral port where Mandalorians can dock without Republic or Separatist scrutiny. Access to your commercial sector for trade. And information, you'll hear things from Republic and Separatist delegations that could be valuable to us. Not state secrets, just general intelligence about galactic politics. You're asking us to become your intelligence network, Garibaldi said skeptically. I'm asking you to share information that helps both our causes, Bo-Katan corrected. Mandalore and Babylon 5 face the same challenge, surviving in a galaxy where everyone wants us to pick a side. That's easier if we have accurate intelligence about what all sides are planning. Delenn studied the Mandalorian leader carefully. Bo-Katan cries, you speak of mutual benefit. But I sense something else. You are testing us. Determining if we are worthy of Mandalorian respect. What is the real measure you are using? Bo-Katan's expression shifted, a flash of something that might have been approval. You're perceptive, Ambassador. Yes, I'm testing you. Mandalorians respect strength, honor, and the courage to stand by your convictions. Captain Sheridan faced down the Hutts without flinching. He enforced his neutrality against both my fleet and theirs. That's worth something. But words and one brave moment aren't enough. I need to see if your station's principles survive real pressure. What kind of pressure? Sheridan asked warily. One of the other Mandalorians, the male, spoke for the first time. We have intelligence that Separatist agents are operating aboard your station. Not the official embassy. Covert operatives planning an operation against Republic interests. If we're right, you'll face a choice. Turn blind eye to maintain relations with the Separatists. Or expose them and risk becoming a target. If you know about Separatist agents, Garibaldi interjected, why not tell us who they are? Because, Bo-Katan replied, I need to see if your security chief can find them himself. If Babylon 5 can't maintain internal security, any alliance with you is worthless. We don't ally with the weak. Sheridan felt irritation flare but suppressed it. The Mandalorian was right, in her own way. Trust in this galaxy had to be earned through demonstration, not promises. All right, he said. We'll find your Separatist agents, if they exist. But Bo-Katan understands something. We don't respond well to tests. We're not audition for your approval. We're a sovereign station making our own choices. If you want an alliance, it will be between equals. Not superior and supplicant. Bo-Katan stood, and for a moment Sheridan thought he'd offended her past redemption. Then she smiled, genuine, fierce, and approving. Spoken like a true Mandalorian. Very well, Captain Sheridan. Find the agents. Prove your station can enforce its own neutrality. Then we'll talk as equals about an alliance that could benefit us both. She replaced her helmet with a smooth, practiced motion. One more thing. The Hutts won't accept your rejection quietly. Gardulla is patient, but her associates are not. Watch for retaliation. Economic pressure first, probably. But if that fails, she let the implication hang. We've faced worse, Sheridan assured her. Perhaps, Bo-Katan said. But you faced worse in your own universe, with your own rules. This galaxy plays by different rules. And the most dangerous players are the ones you haven't met yet. After the Mandalorians departed, Garibaldi turned to Sheridan. So, we've got Separatist covert ops to uncover, Hutt retaliation to prepare for, and Mandalorians testing our worthiness. Just another Tuesday on Babylon 5. At least it's not boring. Ivanova's voice came through the comm. Captain, you should know, we've just detected another ship dropping out of hyperspace. Small, civilian registry, requesting emergency docking. They claim they're refugees fleeing Separatist occupation. More refugees, Carr mused. How appropriate. Babylon 5 was always a sanctuary for those fleeing persecution. Some things, it seems, transcend universes. Sheridan looked out the viewport at the endless starfield, at the ships moving through Babylon 5's docking pattern, at the impossible diversity of species and factions converging on their 5 miles of rotating hull. We came here by accident, he said quietly. But maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe we're here because this galaxy needs what we represent. A third option. A place where the endless cycles of conflict can be interrupted, if only temporarily. Or, Delenn added softly, we are here to learn that some conflicts are too deeply rooted to resolve. That some galaxies are beyond saving. Faith manages, Sheridan replied, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. Somewhere in the shadows of Coruscant, Darth Sidious observed through the Force as Babylon 5 navigated its first major tests. The station was proving more resilient than expected. More principled. More dangerous. Plans would need to be adjusted. Pressure applied more carefully. And if necessary, eliminated before it could become a genuine threat to the grand design. But for now, he would watch. And wait. And prepare for the moment when Babylon 5's precious neutrality would shatter under the weight of impossible choices. That moment, he knew, was coming soon. Garibaldi found the Separatist agents in 3 days. Or rather, they found him. It started with small things. Supply manifests that didn't quite add up. Docking bay workers who asked too many questions about Republic ship movements. A pattern of maintenance requests in sectors adjacent to where Republic delegations held private meetings. Individually, each incident was explainable. Together, they formed a picture. They're good, Garibaldi admitted in the secure briefing room. Sheridan, Delenn, Ivanova, and Zach Allen, his second in security, sat around the table reviewing the evidence. Professional intelligence operatives, not amateurs. They've established legitimate cover identities, integrated into the station's population, and they're being very careful not to trigger obvious red flags. How many? Sheridan asked. We've identified 5 for certain. Could be more. 3 work in commercial sectors, 1 in maintenance, 1 actually applied for a security position. Had the guts to infiltrate my own department. Garibaldi's expression was grudgingly impressed despite his anger. They're not just gathering intelligence. They're preparing for something. We found equipment that could be used for communications jamming, explosive compounds disguised as industrial chemicals, and schematics of the station's Republic Embassy section. Delenn's expression darkened. They plan to attack the Republic delegation. From within our station. Looks like it, Garibaldi confirmed. The timing aligns with a scheduled visit from a Republic senator next week. Senator Amidala of Naboo, apparently a major voice for peace negotiations. Take her out on neutral ground, blame it on security failure, and Babylon 5 loses credibility with the Republic while the Separatists get rid of a political problem. Elegant, Ivanova said bitterly. Solve two problems with one assassination. Sheridan stood, pacing to the viewport. The weight of command settled on his shoulders like a familiar burden. This was the test Bo-Katan had warned about. The moment when neutrality stopped being a comfortable principle and became a knife's edge to walk. Options, he said. We arrest them, Zack suggested. Publicly. Make it clear that Babylon 5 doesn't tolerate covert operations regardless of which side conducts them. That would satisfy the Republic, Ivanova noted. But it would infuriate the Separatists. Dooku would claim we're abandoning neutrality, siding with the Republic against legitimate Confederate interests. We could expel them quietly, Garibaldi offered. No public announcement. Just revoke their docking privileges and ship them out. Keeps both sides happy because neither knows we found their operation. But then we look weak, Delenn countered. The Mandalorians are watching. If we cannot enforce our own laws, if we allow covert operations to succeed through quiet compromise, we prove Bo-Katan correct, that our neutrality is merely comfortable words without substance. Kar's voice came through the comm, he'd been monitoring the discussion remotely. There is a third option, Captain. One that I employed during the non-resistance against Centauri occupation. Use the agents. Feed them false information. Let them believe their operation is succeeding while you control exactly what they learn and when. Counterintelligence, Garibaldi said thoughtfully. It's risky. If they figure out they've been compromised, they'll accelerate their timeline or abort and we lose the chance to roll up the whole network. Sheridan turned from the viewport, his decision crystallizing. We do all of it. We arrest the agents publicly, but we also send a message to Count Dooku through back channels. We'll tell him exactly what we found, give him 24 hours to recall any other operatives we might have missed, and make it clear that this is his one warning. After this, anyone caught conducting covert operations gets handed over to their enemies. That's dangerous, Ivanova warned. You're giving the Separatists intelligence about our security capabilities. I'm being transparent, Sheridan corrected. Which is the only way neutrality works. Both sides need to know we play by the same rules for everyone. We're not the Republic's ally or the Separatists' friend. We're a neutral station that enforces neutral laws. If that makes us unpredictable to intelligence services, good. Unpredictable is safer than predictable in wartime. Delenn nodded slowly. It is the Vorlon way. Not to hide truth, but to illuminate it so brightly that deception becomes impossible. I approve, John. Though I fear the cost. The cost, Kar interjected from the comm, will be measured in how many factions decide that Babylon 5 is more trouble than we're worth. Some will respect our integrity. Others will see it as naive weakness to be exploited. Then we'll deal with them as they come, Sheridan replied. Garibaldi, coordinate with Zack. I want those arrests executed simultaneously, no warning, no chance for them to destroy evidence or warn Confederates. Ivanova, prepare a statement for station-wide broadcast explaining what happened and why. Make it clear this isn't about taking sides, it's about enforcing our laws. And the message to Dooku? Garibaldi asked. I'll deliver that personally, Sheridan said. Through the Separatist embassy. If we're going to accuse them of espionage, I owe them the courtesy of direct communication. The arrests went smoothly. Too smoothly, Garibaldi thought, which meant the agents had expected it. They surrendered without resistance, without destroying evidence, without the panic that usually accompanied blown cover. They were professionals who knew they'd been caught and were already calculating their next moves. The station-wide broadcast triggered exactly the reaction Sheridan expected. The Republic delegation praised Babylon 5's security vigilance. The Separatist embassy issued a formal protest claiming the arrested individuals were legitimate civilian contractors being persecuted for their political beliefs. Neither side was surprised. Both were posturing for advantage. But it was Sheridan's private meeting with the Separatist attaché, a Mun named Sandhill who represented the banking clan's interests, that would determine the real consequences. Captain Sheridan, Sandhill said, his elongated features composed in an expression of calculated offense, the Confederacy is deeply disappointed by these accusations. The individuals you arrested are civilian contractors engaged in legitimate commercial activities. They were Separatist intelligence operatives planning an assassination, Sheridan replied flatly. He placed a data pad on the table between them. Here's the evidence. Communications equipment, explosive compounds, and detailed schematics of our Republic Embassy section. Unless civilian contractors in your Confederacy routinely carry bomb-making materials, I think we both know what they were. Sandhill didn't touch the data pad. Even if your allegations were accurate, which I dispute, such activities would be entirely justified. The Republic has committed countless atrocities against Confederacy worlds. Retaliation through unconventional means is a legitimate response to state-sponsored violence. Not on my station it isn't, Sheridan said quietly. Sandhill, let me be very clear. I'm not interested in who started your war or who has moral superiority. I'm interested in maintaining Babylon 5 as neutral ground where both sides can operate without fear of violence. Your agents violated that neutrality. They have to go. And if we refuse to acknowledge their connection to the Confederacy, then they'll be tried under Babylon 5 legal codes for conspiracy to commit murder and terrorism, Sheridan replied. We have our own courts, our own laws, and our own prisons. You can acknowledge them as your operatives and request extradition, or you can disavow them and let us handle justice our way. Your choice. Sandhill's expression remained neutral, but Sheridan saw calculation in his eyes. The Mun was weighing options, assessing political costs, determining which path served Separatist interests best. There is, Sandhill said slowly, a third option. The Confederacy acknowledges a regrettable lapse in security protocols. Certain overzealous individuals, acting without proper authorization, exceeded their mandate. We request their return not as acknowledged agents, but as Confederate citizens who made poor choices. In exchange, the Confederacy commits to reviewing all personnel stationed on Babylon 5 and withdrawing anyone engaged in activities beyond their stated civilian purposes. It was a face-saving compromise. Both sides could claim victory. Sheridan could demonstrate enforcement of neutrality. The Separatists could avoid the embarrassment of publicly acknowledged failed espionage while quietly pulling back their operations. How long? Sheridan asked. 24 hours to identify all personnel requiring reassignment. 48 hours to complete withdrawal and replacement with genuinely civilian staff. And if we find any additional operatives after your deadline? Then, Sandhill said with surprising honesty, we acknowledge that elements within the Confederacy did not receive proper guidance about Babylon 5's unique status. And we accept the consequences of their actions according to your laws. There is, Sandhill said slowly, a third option. The Confederacy acknowledges a regrettable lapse in security protocols. Certain overzealous individuals, acting without proper authorization, exceeded their mandate. We request their return not as acknowledged agents, but as Confederate citizens who made poor choices. In exchange, the Confederacy commits to reviewing all personnel stationed on Babylon 5 and withdrawing anyone engaged in activities beyond their stated civilian purposes. It was a face-saving compromise. Both sides could claim victory. Sheridan could demonstrate enforcement of neutrality. The Separatists could avoid the embarrassment of publicly acknowledged failed espionage while quietly pulling back their operations. How long? Sheridan asked. 24 hours to identify all personnel requiring reassignment. 48 hours to complete withdrawal and replacement with genuinely civilian staff. And if we find any additional operatives after your deadline? Then, Sandhill said with surprising honesty, we acknowledge that elements within the Confederacy did not receive proper guidance about Babylon 5's unique status. And we accept the consequences of their actions according to your laws. Sheridan studied the Mun carefully. This was as close to a genuine agreement as he was likely to get from a Separatist official. It wasn't trust, neither side trusted the other. But it was mutual recognition of boundaries and consequences. Agreed, Sheridan said, extending his hand. Sandhill hesitated, then grasped it in a formal human gesture. His grip was cool, his skin smooth, his handshake perfunctory. But the agreement was real. After Sandhill departed, Delenn emerged from the adjoining observation room where she'd been monitoring through the Force. You trust him? Not even slightly, Sheridan replied. But I trust that he understands consequences. The Separatists need neutral stations. They need places where back-channel negotiations can occur, where intelligence can be gathered through legal means, where their civilian populations can trade without Republic interference. Babylon 5 offers all that, if they don't force us to choose sides through their own actions. And if they test us again? Then we prove we meant what we said. Publicly. Painfully. In a way that makes every faction in this galaxy understand that Babylon 5's neutrality isn't negotiable. A chime interrupted them. Ivanova's voice came through the comm, carrying an edge of tension. Captain, the Mandalorians are here. Bo-Katan is requesting immediate audience. She says it's urgent. Bo-Katan Kryze stood in the observation dome, her armor reflecting the starlight filtering through the transparisteel. She'd removed her helmet again, and Sheridan could see approval in her expression. Impressive, she said without preamble. You found the agents, arrested them publicly, negotiated their return without starting a diplomatic incident, and forced the Separatists to acknowledge boundaries. All in 3 days. You were monitoring our communications, Sheridan observed. Of course, Bo-Katan replied without shame. I told you, I needed to see if you could enforce your own security. You passed. So now we talk about the alliance I proposed. She activated a holoprojector, displaying a star map of the sector. Babylon 5 currently exists in a power vacuum. Republic influence extends to here. Separatist control reaches here. Hutt space covers this region. You're positioned at the intersection of all three, which makes you valuable real estate. Every faction wants to control or influence you. Tell me something I don't know, Sheridan said. Here's what you don't know, Bo-Katan continued, expanding the map. The Hutts are planning a blockade. Not military, economic. They'll pressure every trade route feeding into your sector, make it expensive and dangerous to supply your station. They want you desperate enough to accept their terms. When? Delenn asked sharply. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. They're still arranging logistics. But it's coming, and when it does, you'll have a choice. Starve, submit to Hutt control, or break neutrality by asking the Republic or Separatists for protection. Sheridan felt cold certainty settle in his gut. This was the real test. The Mandalorian security challenge had been preliminary. This was the existential threat. The moment when maintaining neutrality might cost Babylon 5 everything. Unless, Bo-Katan continued, you have an alternative supply line. Mandalorian traders operate throughout the sector. We ignore Hutt territorial claims and we're well armed enough that most pirates think twice before attacking our convoys. We can supply Babylon 5 through the blockade. At what price? Garibaldi asked suspiciously. Standard commercial rates, Bo-Katan replied. No extortion, no hidden costs. But in exchange, Babylon 5 and Mandalore formalize a mutual defense pact. Not a military alliance, neither of us wants entanglement in the Clone Wars. But an agreement that attacks on one are attacks on both. That our traders operate under mutual protection. That we share intelligence about threats to our common interests. You're asking us to choose sides after all, Sheridan said. Between the Hutts and Mandalore. No, Bo-Katan corrected. The Hutts are criminals. Mandalore is a sovereign system. Choosing between lawful commerce and criminal extortion isn't taking sides in your war, it's basic moral clarity. Unless you believe there's no difference between legitimate trade and slavery-backed criminal enterprises. Delenn stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Bo-Katan cries, you speak of common interests and mutual protection. But I sense you offer this alliance for reasons beyond commerce. What do you truly seek from Babylon 5? The Mandalorian leader was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried unexpected vulnerability. Mandalore is alone. We've maintained neutrality through the Clone Wars, but it's cost us. The Republic sees us as potential assets they can't access. The Separatists see us as enemies they haven't fought yet. We're strong enough that nobody attacks us directly, but isolated enough that we could be destroyed if circumstances changed. She gestured to the station around them. You've built something remarkable here. A genuinely neutral station that enforces its neutrality through principle and strength. If Babylon 5 survives, if you prove that neutrality is sustainable even in wartime, you give Mandalore a model to follow. A partner in isolation. Proof that there are alternatives to endless war. And if we fail? Sheridan asked quietly. Then we learn that neutrality is a beautiful dream that dies in the harsh reality of galactic politics, Bo-Katan replied. And Mandalore will have to choose sides after all. A choice I very much wish to avoid. Sheridan looked at Delenn, saw her slight nod of approval. Looked at Garibaldi, saw cautious agreement. Looked out at the stars and thought about the impossible position they occupied, refugees from another universe trying to maintain principles in a galaxy that had forgotten how to value them. All right, he said finally. We'll formalize an alliance. Trade agreements, mutual protection, intelligence sharing. But Bo-Katan, understand something. If this is a trick, if Mandalore tries to use us as a tool for your own political advantage, the alliance ends immediately. We're not assets to be leveraged. We're partners or we're nothing. Bo-Katan extended her hand in the Mandalorian warrior's gesture, forearm to forearm, a grip that spoke of equals facing danger together. This is the way, she said formally. Sheridan grasped her arm, feeling the cool beskar of her gauntlet against his skin. This is the way, he repeated, accepting the Mandalorian phrase even as he wondered what he'd just committed Babylon 5 to. After Bo-Katan departed to finalize the treaty details with Ivanova, Sheridan stood alone in the observation dome. Delenn joined him, slipping her hand into his. We're building something, she said softly. Not just surviving. Building. Alliances, relationships, a network of neutral powers who might change the balance of this war. Or we're painting a target on our backs, Sheridan replied. The Hutts will retaliate. The Separatists will see the Mandalorian alliance as Republic bias. And somewhere out there, the Sith are watching, waiting to see if we're useful or dangerous. Faith manages, Delenn reminded him. Does it? Sheridan asked. Delenn, in our universe, we had allies. Ancient races who could intervene when things got too desperate. Here, we're on our own. Humans, Minbari, Narn, Centauri. All of us from a universe that doesn't exist anymore, trying to carve out survival in someone else's galaxy. Then we do what we have always done, Delenn said firmly. We stand. We build. We prove that there are alternatives to endless conflict. And if we fall knowing we tried. Sheridan pulled her close, finding strength in her certainty. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that forces far beyond their understanding were already moving to test whether Babylon 5's principles could survive the weight of galactic politics. In the shadows of Coruscant, Darth Sidious smiled. The station had survived its first tests admirably. But tests could be calibrated. Pressures could be increased. And every alliance Babylon 5 formed created new vulnerabilities to exploit. The Mandalorian connection was particularly interesting. It suggested the station's leadership understood the value of strategic partnerships. Good. That made them predictable. And predictable variables could be controlled. For now, let them build their network. Let them believe they were creating something sustainable. When the moment came, and it would come soon, their very success would become the weapon used to destroy them. The Clone Wars were entering their final phase. Order 66 approached. And when that hammer fell, every neutral power in the galaxy would have to choose, submit to the Empire or be eliminated. Babylon 5 would be no exception. Senator Padmé Amidala arrived on Babylon 5 6 days later, and with her came the weight of the galaxy's attention. Her ship, a sleek Nubian diplomatic vessel, docked with full ceremonial honors. Republic News Services broadcast the event across dozens of systems. The Separatists watched with barely concealed hostility. And in the shadows, intelligence operatives from half a dozen factions monitored every moment. Sheridan stood in the docking bay with the full ambassadorial delegation. Delenn wore formal Minbari robes. Karr had donned the ceremonial vestments of the Kari. Even Londo had appeared in full Centauri regalia, claiming that, when royalty visits, one must demonstrate appropriate magnificence. The senator who emerged from the airlock was younger than Sheridan expected. She moved with grace that suggested both diplomatic training and combat readiness, her dark eyes taking in everything with sharp intelligence. Behind her came handmaidens who Sheridan's security instincts identified as bodyguards, and a protocol droid that immediately began cataloging the station's specifications. Captain Sheridan, Amidala said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of a career politician who also happened to be genuine. Thank you for receiving me. Babylon 5 has become the subject of intense interest in the Senate. A station that maintains neutrality in our war, that negotiates with both Republic and Separatists, that has formed alliances with Mandalore. You've accomplished in weeks what most diplomats fail to achieve in lifetimes. Senator Amidala, welcome to Babylon 5, Sheridan replied. I hope your visit will help both our peoples understand each other better. As they walked toward the ambassadorial quarters prepared for her delegation, Sheridan noticed Amidala's attention fixing on Delenn. The two women regarded each other with the mutual recognition of those who'd fought impossible battles against entrenched power. Ambassador Delenn, Amidala said. Master Yoda spoke of you. He said you touched the Force through a different understanding, that your people have developed philosophies that challenge Jedi orthodoxy. Master Yoda is gracious, Delenn replied. But yes, the Minbari have walked a path toward understanding the universe's fundamental energies that diverges from Jedi tradition. We would be honored to discuss these matters with you, Senator. Please, Amidala said with genuine warmth, call me Padmé. I find that formal titles often inhibit honest conversation. Londo, never one to miss an opportunity, swept forward with a theatrical bow. Senator, Padmé, I am Ambassador Londo Mollari of the Centauri Republic. Or rather, what was the Centauri Republic before dimensional catastrophe deposited us in your fascinating galaxy? I must say, your reputation precedes you. A queen who became a senator, who fights for peace against those who profit from war. Most admirable. Also most dangerous. Such positions tend to accumulate enemies. I'm aware, Padmé replied dryly. I've survived several assassination attempts. It comes with advocating for unpopular positions. Which is precisely why you've come here, Sheridan observed as they entered the conference room he'd prepared. Babylon 5 represents an alternative narrative to the Clone Wars. A place where neutrality survives. You want to understand how we do it, and whether our model could be applied to ending your war. Padmé's expression shifted to surprised respect. Master Yoda was right about you, Captain. You cut through diplomatic niceties to reach the heart of matters. Yes, that's exactly why I'm here. The Senate is divided between those who want total victory over the Separatists and those who seek negotiated peace. I represent the peace faction. But we lack a model for what peace would look like. You've created one. At significant cost, Carr interjected. Senator, our neutrality has made us targets. The Hutts are preparing economic blockade against us. Separatist agents attempted assassination on our station. Even your Republic questions our loyalties because we refuse to choose sides. Neutrality is not comfortable middle ground. It is a knife's edge walked daily. But you survive, Padmé pressed. You formed alliances, Mandalore, for instance. You've established diplomatic relations with both Republic and Confederacy. You've created something unprecedented. Because we had no choice, Sheridan said bluntly. Senator, we're refugees. We came here through circumstances beyond our control. We can't go home. This galaxy is our reality now. We maintain neutrality not from moral superiority but from desperate necessity. We simply cannot afford to take sides in your war. Padmé leaned forward, her expression intense. Then help me understand. How do you negotiate with both sides when they're committed to each other's destruction? How do you maintain trust when every faction assumes you're secretly allied with their enemies? What's the mechanism that makes neutrality sustainable? Delenn answered, her voice carrying that quality of spiritual certainty. Transparency. We hide nothing from either side. When Separatist agents were discovered planning violence aboard our station, we arrested them publicly and informed both Republic and Confederacy exactly what we found. When the Republic offers protection, we acknowledge it openly while also acknowledging Separatist offers. We survive because both sides know exactly where we stand, and that our principles are non-negotiable. Also, Londo added with characteristic cynicism, we make ourselves valuable to all parties. Babylon 5 is where unofficial negotiations occur. Where intelligence is gathered through observation rather than espionage. Where back-channel communications happen beyond public scrutiny. Every faction benefits from our existence, which means destroying us serves no one's interests. Padmé absorbed this, her political mind clearly working through implications. So you've created a system where your destruction would cost all factions more than your continued neutrality. Elegant. But it requires that all parties act rationally, value long-term stability over short-term advantage. What happens when someone decides that your neutrality threatens their strategic objectives more than your services benefit them? The question hung in the air. Sheridan met Padmé's eyes and saw that she already knew the answer. She was testing them, determining if Babylon 5's leadership understood the precariousness of their position. Then we defend ourselves, Sheridan said quietly. With everything we have. And we accept that neutrality might cost us everything. Before Padmé could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Garibaldi's voice cut through the calm, urgent and controlled. Captain, we've got a situation. Hutt vessels just dropped out of hyperspace, 47 ships ranging from bulk freighters to armed frigates. They're taking up positions around the station in a blockade formation. We're being hailed. Sheridan's jaw tightened. The economic warfare Bo-Katan had warned about was beginning. Put them through. A holographic projection appeared, not Gardulla this time, but a different Hutt, even more massive, its eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. When it spoke, the translator's voice carried cold certainty. Babylon Station. I am Zorba the Hutt, cartel enforcer. You rejected Gardulla's generous offer of partnership. This was unwise. Beginning now, all commercial traffic to your station must pay Hutt passage fees. All supply ships must route through Hutt-controlled checkpoints. All trade must be conducted through Hutt intermediaries. These are not negotiations. These are facts. Comply or starve. The transmission cut off before Sheridan could respond. Through the viewport, he could see Hutt vessels spreading out, creating a perimeter that would intercept any approaching ship. It was a blockade in everything but name, and completely legal under the loose territorial laws governing neutral space. Padmé stood, her expression hardening. Captain Sheridan, the Republic cannot allow a Hutt blockade to threaten a neutral station. If you request Republic protection, I'm authorized to dispatch a fleet immediately. Which would end our neutrality, Sheridan replied. The Separatists would see Republic ships defending us as proof we've chosen sides. Our entire position collapses. Then what will you do? Padmé asked. Sheridan turned to Ivanova. Get me Bo-Katan cries. And activate the defense grid. Non-lethal settings, but I want it clear we're not defenseless. To Padmé, Senator, you're about to see how neutrality survives when someone tries to break it. 30 minutes later, the situation had escalated into a complex standoff. The Hutt blockade maintained position. Republic ships had arrived, Padmé's escort, claiming concern for the Senator's safety. Separatist vessels appeared shortly after, not wanting the Republic to claim exclusive protection of Babylon 5. And through it all, Mandalorian warships dropped out of hyperspace in tight formation, their weapons hot and their intentions crystal clear. Bo-Katan's face appeared on the main view screen, her helmet on, her voice amplified through external speakers directed at the Hutt fleet. Zorba the Hutt. This is Bo-Katan cries of Mandalore. Babylon 5 operates under Mandalorian protection through formal treaty. Your blockade violates that protection. You have one warning. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Zorba's response was a rumbling laugh. Mandalorians threaten the Hutt Cartel. Foolish. We number in hundreds of systems. Mandalore is one world. One world, Bo-Katan agreed, that has never been conquered. One world whose warriors have broken empires. One world that doesn't bluff. This is your final warning, Zorba. Leave or be removed. The comm channel fell silent. Sheridan watched the tactical display as Mandalorian ships moved into attack formation. The Hutt vessels shifted nervously. They outweighed the Mandalorians 3-1, but everyone knew Mandalorian warriors were worth 10 times their numbers in most combat situations. Then Padmé did something unexpected. She activated a direct transmission to Zorba, her voice carrying the authority of the Galactic Senate. Zorba the Hutt. I am Senator Padmé Amidala of the Republic. I'm currently aboard Babylon 5 under diplomatic protection. Any action that threatens this station threatens a sitting senator. The Republic will consider such action an act of war against the Senate itself. Is the Hutt Cartel prepared for that consequence? A new voice joined the comm network, Count Dooku's cultured tones, transmitted from the Separatist vessels that had arrived. Senator Amidala speaks truth for once. The Confederacy also has interests in maintaining Babylon 5's neutrality. Hutt interference in galactic diplomacy is unacceptable. Zorba, you face Mandalorians, Republic forces, and Separatist vessels. Withdraw while you still can claim strategic repositioning rather than humiliating defeat. Sheridan watched the Hutt fleet through the viewport and saw the moment Zorba's calculations shifted. The blockade had been meant to intimidate an isolated station. Instead, it had triggered a convergence of forces that turned Babylon 5 into the most heavily defended neutral station in the sector. Zorba's final transmission was terse. Babylon Station has made powerful enemies today. The cartel does not forget. We withdraw, for now. But this matter is not finished. The Hutt fleet jumped back into hyperspace, leaving behind a tense silence broken only by the background hum of station systems. Padmé turned to Sheridan, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. That was remarkable. You turned a crisis into a demonstration that all major powers will defend your neutrality. But Captain, Zorba spoke truth. The Hutts don't forget. They'll retaliate, probably through means you can't predict or defend against easily. We know, Sheridan replied. But we also just proved something important. Babylon 5's neutrality isn't just our principle, it's becoming strategically valuable to every major faction. The Republic wants us as a back channel to the Separatists. The Separatists want us as proof that alternatives to Republic dominance exist. Mandalore wants us as a partner in isolation. Even you coming here, Senator, reinforces our position. Delenn moved to stand beside Sheridan, her hand finding his. Senator Amidala, you asked how neutrality survives. This is how. Not through passive avoidance of conflict, but through active demonstration that our destruction serves no one's interests while our survival benefits everyone. Carr nodded slowly. The Narn have a saying, the wise warrior makes himself essential to all sides. We are becoming essential. But with that comes danger. The moment we cease to be valuable, we become expendable. Londo, for once, was serious. The greater danger is that we become too valuable. When something becomes essential to all factions, those factions begin competing to control it. We may have survived the Hutt blockade, but we've also advertised our importance to every power broker in this galaxy. Some will court us. Others will try to own us. And a few will decide that if they cannot control us, we must be destroyed to deny our value to their enemies. The observation hung in the air, undeniable in its logic. Padmé studied them all. These refugees from another universe who'd built something unprecedented in weeks, and made a decision. Captain Sheridan, I came here to understand your model of neutrality. I've learned more than I expected. But I've also seen something else, a vulnerability. You're building a network of alliances and relationships, but you lack formal recognition. As long as Babylon 5 exists in legal gray space, you're vulnerable to claims that you're pirates, squatters, or illegitimate actors. What are you suggesting? Sheridan asked. I'm suggesting, Padmé said carefully, that I introduce a motion in the Senate to formally recognize Babylon 5 as a sovereign neutral entity under Republic law. It won't give you Republic membership or protection, but it will give you legal status. Recognition that you're a legitimate diplomatic station with rights under galactic law. The Separatists would never accept Republic recognition, even Nova pointed out. No, Padmé agreed. But if the Republic recognizes you, it creates pressure for the Separatists to do the same. Neither side can afford to let the other claim exclusive diplomatic relationship with you. You'll end up with dual recognition, which reinforces your neutrality rather than compromising it. Sheridan considered this, seeing the political chess game several moves ahead. It was risky. Formal recognition meant formal obligations. But it also meant protection under law rather than mere strategic expediency. Do it, he said finally. But Senator, understand. We won't compromise our neutrality for legal status. If recognition comes with strings attached, we'll reject it. Padmé smiled, and in that moment Sheridan saw why she'd survived as a peace advocate in a galaxy consumed by war. Captain, the strings are already attached. The question is whether you acknowledge them or pretend they don't exist. I prefer honest complexity to comfortable delusion. Then we'll work well together, Delenn said softly. As Padmé departed to prepare her Senate motion, Sheridan stood in the observation dome watching the convergence of ships around Babylon 5. Republic vessels maintaining protective distance. Separatist ships monitoring from their own positions. Mandalorian warships patrolling the perimeter. All of them ostensibly protecting the station's neutrality. All of them actually positioning themselves for advantage in the larger war. We're becoming a prize, he said quietly to Delenn. Exactly what Londo warned about. Yes, she agreed. But also a symbol. Proof that alternatives exist. That species from different universes can build something new rather than simply choosing sides in ancient conflicts. That faith manages, even when the odds seem impossible. Garibaldi's voice cut through the moment. Captain, we've got incoming communication. Origin point is, that's strange. It's coming from Coruscant, but not from any official government channel. Deep encryption. Whoever's sending this doesn't want to be traced. Put it through, Sheridan ordered, tension creeping up his spine. The holographic figure that appeared was hooded, its features obscured, its voice modulated to prevent identification. But power radiated from it, dark, ancient, patient. Captain Sheridan, the figure said, its voice like silk over steel. Congratulations on surviving your first major test. You've proven Babylon 5 can navigate complex political situations. Most impressive for refugees from a dead universe. Who are you? Sheridan demanded. I am someone who recognizes opportunity when it presents itself. You've built something valuable, Captain. A neutral station that all factions trust just enough to use but not enough to control. Such things are rare. And rare things attract collectors. If you're threatening us. I'm offering you information, the figure interrupted. The Clone Wars are approaching their end game. Forces are in motion that will reshape the galaxy. Your neutrality will be tested in ways that make Hutt blockades look like minor inconveniences. When that time comes, you'll face a choice. Adapt to the new order or be destroyed resisting it. We've faced those choices before, Sheridan said. In your universe, perhaps. But this is my galaxy, Captain. And in my galaxy, neutrality is a luxury that only the truly powerful can afford. I'm curious to see if Babylon 5 proves powerful enough. The transmission ended, leaving nothing but static and the echo of threat. Delenn's face had gone pale. John, that presence, it felt like the shadows. Ancient. Manipulative. Absolutely certain of its own superiority. The Sith, Sheridan said quietly. It has to be. Yoda warned us they were watching. Now they've made contact. To what end? Garibaldi asked. Sheridan stared at the place where the hologram had appeared, feeling pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. To test us. To see if we're tools they can use or threats they need to eliminate. Everything, the Hutt blockade, Padmé's visit, the convergence of fleets around our station, it's all being observed. Measured. Incorporated into plans we can't see. Then what do we do? Ivanova asked. We do what we've always done, Sheridan replied. We stand. We build. We prove that there are alternatives to endless manipulation and war. And if the Sith want to test us, let them. We've faced down ancient evils before. We'll face them again. But even as he spoke the words, Sheridan couldn't shake the feeling that they were pieces on a game board, moving toward positions they didn't understand, serving purposes they couldn't fathom. The Clone Wars were ending. Something darker was beginning. And Babylon 5 stood at the center of forces that would determine the galaxy's future, whether they wanted that position or not. The transmission from Senator Amidala came 3 weeks later, and the grief in her voice transcended the holographic medium. Her face was drawn, her eyes hollow with loss that went beyond political defeat. Behind her, smoke still rose from burning buildings on Coruscant. Captain Sheridan, she began, her voice barely controlled, I'm sending this from a secure location. The Republic has fallen. The Jedi Order has been destroyed. Chancellor Palpatine has declared himself emperor and transformed the democratic government into a totalitarian regime. The clone army turned on the Jedi, Order 66, they're calling it. Thousands of Jedi dead in a single coordinated betrayal. Sheridan felt ice spread through his chest. Beside him, Delenn gasped softly, her hand rising to her mouth. Yoda's warnings about darkness manipulating events had been proven horrifyingly accurate. The Separatist leadership is also gone, Padmé continued. Executed by Palpatine's new apprentice, a Sith Lord called Darth Vader. The Clone Wars ended not with peace but with consolidation. Both sides were puppets all along, manipulated by a Sith conspiracy that spent decades positioning itself for this moment. Her voice broke slightly. Everything we fought for, it was all orchestrated. Every battle, every death, every political compromise, all of it serving Palpatine's plan to create an empire from the Republic's corpse. She paused, composing herself with visible effort. Captain, I'm contacting you because Babylon 5 now faces an impossible choice. The Empire will demand your submission. They'll send Star Destroyers to enforce compliance. They'll offer protection and resources in exchange for accepting Imperial authority. If you refuse, they'll destroy you as a symbol of resistance. What about the Separatist worlds? Sheridan asked. The systems that fought for independence. Being incorporated into the Empire by force, Padmé replied. Some resist. Most surrender. The Emperor is consolidating power faster than anyone thought possible. And Captain, there's something else. He knows about you. About Babylon 5. That transmission you received, the hooded figure. That was Palpatine. The Emperor himself has been watching your station, measuring your potential value or threat. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The mysterious transmission. The Sith Lord's curiosity about whether Babylon 5 could afford neutrality. It had all been reconnaissance, determining how this unprecedented variable fit into his galactic chess game. What are you going to do, Senator? Delenn asked softly. Padmé's expression hardened beneath the grief. I'm helping to organize a resistance. Not military, not yet. But a network of worlds, systems, and individuals who won't accept imperial tyranny. We're calling it the Rebel Alliance. It's small, poorly funded, and facing impossible odds. But it's the only choice that preserves any hope for the future. You're asking us to join, Sheridan said. No, Padmé corrected. I'm warning you that neutrality is about to become infinitely more difficult. Under the Republic, neutrality was accepted, even valued. Under the Empire, neutrality will be seen as defiance. Palpatine doesn't tolerate independent power bases. You'll be given one choice, submit or be crushed. After Padmé's transmission ended, silence filled the command center. Finally, Carr spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd lived through similar transformations. I have seen this before, he said quietly. When the Centauri occupied Narn, they offered the same choice. Accept our rule peacefully and receive generous terms. Resist and be destroyed utterly. Some Narn colonies accepted. They survived but lost their souls. Others fought and died free. Neither choice was good. Both were necessary. Londo, for once, didn't argue. The Centauri Republic also faced such moments. When we made our devil's bargain with the shadows, we told ourselves we were preserving our civilization. In truth, we were selling it piecemeal to forces we couldn't control. By the time we understood what we'd done, we were so deep in darkness that escape seemed impossible. This Emperor, Delenn said, her voice carrying cold certainty, is like the shadows. Not in power, perhaps, but in philosophy. He believes in evolution through conflict. In establishing order through domination. In eliminating all alternatives to his vision. We cannot serve such a being. We cannot submit to such a philosophy. It would betray everything Babylon 5 represents. Then we resist, Sheridan said. But carefully. Intelligently. Not a suicidal gesture of defiance but a calculated strategy to survive while maintaining our principles. Garibaldi leaned forward. Captain, we need to be realistic. The Empire has Star Destroyers. Millions of clone soldiers. Resources beyond anything we can match. If they decide we're a threat and send a fleet, we can hold them off for maybe an hour before our defenses are overwhelmed. Then we make sure they never decide we're a threat worth eliminating, Sheridan replied. We become so diplomatically valuable, so strategically useful, that destroying us costs the Empire more than tolerating us. How? Ivanova asked bluntly. The answer came from an unexpected source. Marcus Cole entered the command center, the Ranger having been monitoring communications throughout the crisis. His expression carried that characteristic mixture of dry humor and desperate determination. We become what we've always been, Marcus said. A neutral meeting ground. But instead of serving both sides of a war, we serve the Empire and its enemies simultaneously. We're the place where Imperial officials conduct discreet negotiations. Where information flows in ways that benefit everyone. Where resistance cells can operate invisibly because we're too valuable to shut down. That's a tightrope walk over an abyss, Garibaldi protested. One wrong move and we fall. Yes, Marcus agreed. But it's the only walk available. The alternative is choosing sides, and choosing the rebellion means certain destruction, while choosing the Empire means surrendering everything we stand for. A chime interrupted the debate. Ivanova checked her console, her expression going grim. Captain, we're receiving an incoming Imperial transmission. It's marked highest priority, direct from Coruscant. They're demanding you accept it personally. Sheridan straightened, knowing this was the moment Padmé had warned about. Put it through. The holographic figure that appeared wore black robes and a hood that obscured most of his features. But his eyes were visible, yellow, penetrating, radiating dark power that made the Force ripple with malevolent energy. Emperor Palpatine regarded Babylon 5's command staff with an expression that mixed amusement and calculation. Captain Sheridan, Palpatine said, his voice carrying false warmth over layers of threat. At last we meet properly. I've been watching your station with great interest. A refugee outpost that has carved neutrality from chaos. Most impressive. I wish to congratulate you personally on your achievements. Your Majesty, Sheridan replied, keeping his tone carefully neutral. The galaxy's transformation has been dramatic. The fall of the Republic, the elimination of the Jedi Order, the rise of the Empire. All accomplished with remarkable speed. Efficiency, Palpatine corrected, born of necessity. The Republic had become corrupt, inefficient, paralyzed by endless debate. The galaxy required strong leadership. I have provided it. Through military dictatorship, Delenn said quietly. Through betrayal of the Jedi who served the Republic faithfully. Through consolidation of absolute power in a single individual. This is not leadership. This is tyranny. Palpatine's eyes fixed on Delenn, and Sheridan saw recognition there. Ambassador Delenn. The Force-sensitive who touches the mystical energies through alien understanding. Yes, I've studied your rather unique situation. You perceive the Force but remain uncorrupted by Jedi dogma. Fascinating. His gaze returned to Sheridan. Your ambassador speaks with passion, Captain. But passion without power is merely noise. The question before you is simple, does Babylon 5 accept the new galactic order, or does it resist futilely? We're a neutral station, Sheridan replied. We don't accept or resist galactic governments. We simply provide neutral ground where diplomacy can occur. Neutrality, Palpatine repeated, his tone suggesting the word amused him. Under the Republic, neutrality was a quaint indulgence. Under the Empire, it is a carefully granted privilege. One that can be revoked if abused. Meaning? Sheridan asked. Meaning, Palpatine said with chilling clarity, that Babylon may 5th continue its neutral operations provided certain conditions are met. You will accept an Imperial observer aboard your station, purely for diplomatic coordination, you understand. You will share intelligence about rebel activities that come to your attention. And you will demonstrate loyalty through cooperation with Imperial interests when requested. Those aren't conditions for neutrality, Carr interjected. Those are demands for submission disguised in diplomatic language. Call it what you wish, Palpatine replied. The alternative is that I designate Babylon 5 a rebel stronghold and dispatch a fleet to eliminate the threat. Your Mandalorian allies cannot stand against Star Destroyers. Your station's defenses, while admirable, are insufficient. You would die as martyrs, but you would still die. The threat hung in the comm channel, undeniable and absolute. Sheridan felt the weight of 250,000 lives depending on his next words. Felt the principles Babylon 5 stood for balancing against survival. Felt every eye in the command center on him, waiting to see if he would fold or fight. Your Majesty, Sheridan said carefully, Babylon 5 has survived by being genuinely neutral. Not aligned with any faction, but valuable to all. If we accept your observers and report on rebel activities, we lose that neutrality. We become an imperial asset, which means the rebellion, and anyone sympathetic to it, will never trust us again. Our value as neutral ground evaporates. Your value, Palpatine countered, is determined by the Empire's assessment, not your own proclamations. If I decide you're valuable, you survive. If I decide otherwise, he let the sentence hang. Delenn stepped forward, her voice carrying that quality of Minbari spiritual authority. Emperor Palpatine, I have faced beings like you before. Ancient powers who believed they could reshape entire galaxies according to their vision. They offered the same choice you offer now. Serve us or be destroyed. We chose a third path. We stood for principles that transcended immediate survival. And in the end, those ancient powers fell while we endured. For the first time, Palpatine's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been genuine interest. You speak of the Vorlons and shadows. Yes, I've accessed what little information exists about your universe's ancient races. Fascinating that you survived their conflicts. But Ambassador, this is not your universe. This is my galaxy. I am not an ancient power to be outlasted. I am the present and future. Resistance to me is not noble, it is simply fatal. Perhaps, Delenn agreed. But some things are worth dying for. Palpatine studied her for a long moment, then smiled, a cold expression that carried no warmth. We shall see. Captain Sheridan, you have 1 week to accept Imperial terms. After that, I will consider Babylon 5 a rebel installation and act accordingly. Choose wisely. The lives of everyone aboard your station depend on it. The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Well, Londo said eventually, that was unambiguous. Submit or die. Simple, brutal, and unfortunately quite probably accurate in its assessment of our military options. Sheridan turned to face his command staff, his ambassadors, his friends. Options. I need every possible option on the table. Ways to survive this without surrendering our principles or getting everyone killed. Marcus spoke first. We could scatter. Evacuate the station, disperse the population across neutral systems. The Empire can't crush what doesn't exist in a single location. Abandoning everything we've built, even Nova countered. And where would everyone go? Most species aboard Babylon 5 are refugees from our universe. They have nowhere else. We could fight, Carr suggested. Not to win. That's impossible. But to make our destruction so costly that the Emperor reconsiders whether we're worth the resources required to eliminate us. That's suicide dressed as strategy, Garibaldi said bluntly. We could accept the terms, Londo offered quietly. Accept the Imperial Observer. Share limited intelligence that doesn't truly compromise anyone. Play the game while secretly maintaining connections to the rebellion. It's dishonest, dangerous, and likely to get us killed when we're inevitably discovered. But it buys time. Sheridan shook his head. Time for what? To watch the Empire consolidate power while we pretend to be neutral but actually serve Imperial interests. That's not neutrality. That's collaboration. Delenn moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. John, there is another possibility. One we have not yet discussed because it seems impossible. But we have achieved impossible things before. What possibility? Sheridan asked. We make contact with the Rebel Alliance, Delenn said. Not to join them militarily, but to coordinate. Babylon 5 remains officially neutral, but we become the place where rebellion planning occurs, where intelligence is shared, where resources are moved through channels the Empire cannot trace. We leverage our neutrality as cover for resistance while maintaining enough surface compliance that the Empire finds destroying us more complicated than tolerating us. That's exactly what Palpatine warned against, Ivanova pointed out. Yes, Delenn agreed. Which means we must be extraordinarily careful. We cannot be caught. We cannot give the Empire justification for the destruction they already plan. But if we succeed, we become genuinely valuable to both sides, providing the Empire with diplomatic services while secretly enabling the rebellion's survival. It's a variant of what Marcus suggested, Sheridan said slowly. A tightrope walk. But one that preserves both our principles and our survival. If we're skilled enough to maintain the deception. Carr leaned back, his expression thoughtful. During the Narn resistance against Centauri occupation, we used exactly this strategy. We maintained surface cooperation while secretly coordinating resistance activities. It worked for years before we were discovered. But when we were discovered, the Centauri's retaliation was absolute. They bombed Narn into submission, killed millions, and occupied our world for decades. I am not proud of my people's actions, Londo said quietly. But Carr speaks truth. This strategy has consequences when it fails. And it always eventually fails. The question is whether you can accomplish enough before failure to justify the cost. Sheridan walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars that still felt alien despite months in this galaxy. He thought about Babylon 5's original purpose, to be a place where war ended, where different species found common ground, where the future was built through understanding rather than violence. That purpose hadn't changed. Only the context. We do it, he said finally. We maintain surface neutrality while secretly supporting the rebellion. We accept the Imperial Observer, someone we can monitor and manage. We share intelligence that's accurate but non-critical, building trust while protecting what matters. And we build a network so subtle, so embedded in our normal operations, that the Empire never suspects we're anything more than pragmatic survivors. It will require everyone's cooperation, Delenn warned. Every ambassador, every staff member, every civilian aboard this station. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and we're discovered. Then we make sure there are no mistakes, Sheridan replied. We've built something unprecedented here. A community of refugees from a dozen species, from a dead universe, who've created neutral ground in someone else's galaxy. We've survived Hutt blockades, separatist espionage, and political pressure from every faction. We can survive the Empire. But we'll do it our way. By standing for what we believe while being smart enough to survive. Garibaldi stepped forward. Captain, I'll coordinate security. We'll establish protocols for identifying and protecting rebel contacts, for moving information without leaving traces, for managing the Imperial Observer in ways that limit their access while appearing cooperative. I'll handle diplomatic coordination, Delenn added. Maintaining relationships with Imperial officials while secretly building rebel networks. The Centauri have centuries of experience with duplicitous diplomacy, Londo offered with dark humor. I will share what I know about maintaining surface cooperation while pursuing underground agendas. Consider it my penance for my people's past sins. And I, Carr said, will draw on Narn resistance experience. We learned hard lessons about surviving under occupation. Those lessons may prove valuable. Marcus nodded. The Rangers were built for exactly this kind of operation. We can coordinate with Padmé's rebel alliance, establish secure communication protocols, and move resources through channels the Empire won't detect. Sheridan felt something shift in the room, the collective decision of people who'd survived impossible situations before and refused to surrender to another impossible situation now. 1 week, he said. We have 1 week to establish the framework for this deception. To prepare for the Imperial Observer's arrival. To make contact with the rebellion and coordinate our efforts. To convince the Emperor that we're pragmatic survivors while secretly becoming the biggest thorn in his empire's side. Faith manages? Delenn asked softly. Faith manages, Sheridan confirmed. But this time, Faith is going to need help from careful planning, ruthless operational security, and a willingness to walk a knife's edge for however long it takes. In the darkness of Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine felt through the Force as Babylon 5's command staff made their decision. He smiled. They would choose resistance disguised as cooperation. He'd seen it in their commander's eyes, felt it in the Minbari ambassador's determination, sensed it in their collective refusal to surrender principles even when survival demanded it. Good. Let them believe they could deceive him. Let them build their networks and coordinate with the pathetic rebellion. He would allow it to continue just long enough to identify every rebel contact, every resistance cell, every sympathizer who used Babylon 5 as cover. And then, when the moment served his purposes, he would crush them all in a demonstration so absolute that neutrality itself would be remembered as a dangerous delusion. Babylon 5 had survived its first tests admirably. But the final test was coming. And this time, there would be no third path, no diplomatic escape, no clever negotiation. There would be only submission or annihilation. The Emperor was patient. He could wait for the perfect moment to deliver that lesson. The Imperial Observer arrived exactly 1 week later, aboard a Lambda-class shuttle escorted by 2 star destroyers that maintained a disturbingly close orbit around Babylon 5. The message was clear: compliance would be monitored, and enforcement was just a turbolaser barrage away. Grand Moff Hutt Tarkin emerged from the shuttle with the bearing of a man who'd never encountered resistance he couldn't crush. Tall, angular, with sharp features that suggested both intelligence and cruelty, he moved through Babylon 5's docking bay as if conducting an inspection of Imperial property. Behind him came a contingent of stormtroopers, not for protection, Sheridan realized, but for psychological effect. Captain Sheridan, Tarkin said, his accent precise and aristocratic. I am Grand Moff Tarkin, appointed by Emperor Palpatine to serve as Imperial liaison to Babylon 5. You will provide me with complete access to station operations, intelligence briefings, and diplomatic communications. I trust this will not be a problem. Welcome to Babylon 5, Grand Moff Tarkin, Sheridan replied, keeping his voice carefully neutral. We'll accommodate Imperial requirements within the bounds of our neutrality protocols. However, complete access to all diplomatic communications would violate confidentiality agreements with other governments. We can provide summaries and relevant intelligence without compromising our neutral status. Tarkin's expression didn't change, but Sheridan saw calculation in his eyes. Captain, I believe you misunderstand your situation. Babylon 5 exists at the Emperor's sufferance. Neutrality is a privilege, not a right. You will provide the access I require, or I will report to His Majesty that this station is uncooperative and potentially harboring rebel sympathies. Before Sheridan could respond, Delenn stepped forward, her voice carrying that quality of immovable spiritual certainty. Grand Moff Tarkin, perhaps you misunderstand our situation. Babylon 5 maintains neutrality through transparency with all parties. If we provide the Empire with unrestricted access to diplomatic communications, we must provide the same to all governments we interact with, including, presumably, the Rebel Alliance when they contact us. Is that the Empire's preference? Tarkin's eyes narrowed. You would not dare host rebel representatives. We would host any government that approached us through proper diplomatic channels, Delenn replied calmly. As we hosted Republic and Separatist delegations during the Clone Wars. As we currently host Mandalorian, Hutt, and Imperial representatives. Neutrality means treating all parties equally, regardless of the Emperor's preferences. The stormtroopers shifted almost imperceptibly, hands moving toward weapons. Tarkin held up a hand, stopping them. Ambassador, you walk a dangerous line. The Emperor's patience has limits. As does ours, Carr interjected, his deep voice resonant in the docking bay. Grand Moff Tarkin, the Narn people spent decades under Centauri occupation. We learned that tyrants only respect strength. You come here with star destroyers and stormtroopers, attempting to intimidate us into submission. But we have survived things far more terrifying than your empire. We will cooperate where cooperation serves mutual interests. We will not surrender our sovereignty because you threaten us. Tarkin studied Carr with cold assessment. The Narn, yes. I've read reports about your species. Conquered, occupied, eventually freed through violence and sacrifice. Tell me, Ambassador, does Babylon 5 command the military force necessary to free itself through similar means? I think not. Military force is not the only form of power, Londo interjected, sweeping forward with characteristic Centauri grandiosity. Grand Moff Tarkin, I am Londo Mollari, and I have served governments that rose and fell through the centuries. I have seen empires that believed themselves eternal crumble into memory. Your emperor is powerful, yes. But power without wisdom is merely a prelude to collapse. Babylon 5 offers you something more valuable than submission, we offer genuine neutrality. A place where imperial business can be conducted away from scrutiny. Where intelligence can be gathered. Where unofficial negotiations can occur. Destroy that value through heavy-handed demands, and the Empire loses more than we do. Tarkin was silent for a long moment, clearly reassessing the diplomatic landscape. These weren't the intimidated refugees he'd expected. They were experienced political operators who'd navigated conflicts that predated the Empire's existence. Very well, he said finally. A compromise. I will require regular intelligence briefings about activities aboard this station. I will have quarters with appropriate security and communications access to Imperial Command. And I will attend diplomatic functions to represent the Empire's interests. In exchange, I will not demand unrestricted access to confidential communications, provided you demonstrate good faith cooperation. Acceptable, Sheridan replied. It was better than he'd hoped for. Tarkin in regular briefings meant controlled information flow. Quarters with communications access meant they could monitor his transmissions. And attending diplomatic functions meant they always knew where he was and what he was observing. As Garibaldi's security team escorted Tarkin to his assigned quarters, Sheridan allowed himself a moment of cautious relief. The first confrontation had gone better than feared. Tarkin had accepted boundaries, which meant the Imperial observer strategy might actually work. But as the stormtroopers filed out of the docking bay, Marcus appeared at Sheridan's elbow, his voice barely audible. Captain, we've received a coded transmission. Rebel Alliance contact requesting secure meeting. They're sending someone to coordinate with us. Who? Sheridan asked quietly. A Mon Calamari admiral named Akbar. And Captain, he's bringing someone else. Someone Tarkin would very much like to capture. 3 days later, a battered freighter docked at Babylon 5 claiming mechanical difficulties and requesting repair time. Garibaldi's security team processed them through standard protocols while transmitting routine reports to Tarkin's office. The Grand Moff barely glanced at the paperwork. Just another broken-down merchant ship among dozens that docked weekly. But in a secure maintenance bay sealed against surveillance, Sheridan met the freighter's true passengers. Admiral Jail Akbar was immediately recognizable, a Mon Calamari with the distinctive salmon-colored skin and large eyes of his species. He carried himself with military precision despite wearing civilian clothes. Beside him stood a young woman Sheridan recognized from intelligence briefings. Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. One of the Imperial Senate's most outspoken critics and a suspected rebel leader. Captain Sheridan, Akbar said, his voice carrying the gravelly quality common to Mon Calamari. Thank you for receiving us under such difficult circumstances. The rebellion owes you a debt for risking Imperial retaliation. We're not doing this for debts, Sheridan replied. We're doing it because the alternative, submitting to Palpatine's tyranny, violates everything Babylon 5 stands for. Leia studied him with sharp, evaluating eyes that reminded Sheridan of Senator Amidala. Captain, the rebellion is small, poorly funded, and facing an empire with unlimited resources. We can't offer you military protection. We can't guarantee your safety if the empire discovers your cooperation. What we can offer is intelligence, coordination, and a shared commitment to resisting tyranny. Is that enough? It has to be, Delenn said softly. Because the alternatives are submission or destruction. Akbar activated a holoprojector, displaying a star map. The rebellion is organizing into cells, independent groups with limited knowledge of each other's operations. If one cell is compromised, it can't betray the others. Babylon 5 could serve a unique role. You're a neutral station where diverse groups gather naturally. Rebel operatives could meet here, exchange information, coordinate operations. All while appearing to conduct legitimate business. You want to use us as an intelligence clearinghouse, Garibaldi observed. Route information through us so rebel cells don't have to risk direct contact with each other. Exactly, Leia confirmed. Your neutrality is the perfect cover. Imperial observers will see diverse groups meeting for commerce, diplomacy, cultural exchange. They won't realize that beneath the surface, the rebellion is coordinating. It's dangerous, Sheridan warned. If we're discovered, you'll be destroyed, Leia finished bluntly. We know. But Captain, every action against the Empire is dangerous. Every rebel cell risks annihilation daily. We're asking you to share that risk, yes. But we're also offering you something important, the chance to actually matter in this fight. To be more than survivors hiding behind neutrality. To actively resist tyranny while maintaining the cover that keeps you alive. Sheridan looked at his command staff, saw the same conflict in their eyes that he felt. This was the decision point. The moment when comfortable principles met harsh reality. When the easy path, genuine neutrality, keeping heads down, surviving, diverged from the harder path of secret resistance. We'll do it, he said finally. But with conditions. First, rebel operations aboard this station must be completely invisible to Imperial surveillance. We provide cover, coordination, and intelligence routing, but you provide the operational security. Second, we maintain genuine diplomatic relations with the Empire. This isn't theater for us. We need Imperial cooperation on trade, security, and station operations. Your resistance activities cannot compromise our surface relationship with Tarkin. Third, if we're compromised, the rebellion publicly disavows any connection to us. We won't drag the entire rebel alliance down with us. Agreed, Akbar said without hesitation. Captain, we'll provide you with secure communication protocols, dead drop locations aboard your station for information exchange, and cover identities for rebel operatives. You'll coordinate with cell leaders through intermediaries who don't know your identity or each other's. Compartmentalization protects everyone. There's one more thing, Leia added. Something more valuable than intelligence or coordination. Hope. The galaxy needs to see that alternatives to Imperial submission exist. That neutrality can survive even under the Empire's shadow. Babylon 5 represents something Palpatine wants to eliminate, the idea that beings can choose their own path. Just by existing, by maintaining your independence, you're resisting. That matters more than you realize. After the rebels departed, Sheridan stood in the observation dome watching their freighter limp away toward the hyperspace jump point, its engine problems miraculously repaired. Delenn joined him, slipping her hand into his with familiar comfort. "We have committed ourselves," she said quietly. "There is no returning to simple neutrality now." "Was there ever?" Sheridan asked. "From the moment we arrived in this galaxy, we were forced to choose. Join one faction or another. Submit to criminals or resist them. Accept the Empire's terms or defy them. The only choice we really had was whether to resist openly or secretly. And we chose secretly," Delenn said. "The shadows would approve. Working through manipulation and deception to achieve our goals." "No," Sheridan corrected firmly. "The shadows believed conflict was the only path to evolution. That chaos and violence made species stronger. We believe the opposite. We believe understanding and cooperation are stronger than tyranny and fear. We're not manipulating for personal power. We're resisting to preserve the possibility that this galaxy can be something better than an imperial dictatorship." "Do you think we can survive this, John?" Sheridan pulled her close, finding strength in her presence. "I don't know. But I know we have to try. Because if we don't, if every neutral power either submits or is destroyed, then Palpatine wins. The galaxy accepts that tyranny is inevitable. And everyone who might have resisted decides survival through submission is the only option." A chime interrupted the moment. Ivanova's voice carried tension. "Captain, Grand Moff Tarkin is requesting your presence immediately. He says there's been a development regarding rebel activities in the sector." Sheridan and Delenn exchanged a look. The game had begun in earnest. Tarkin would probe, test, search for any sign that Babylon 5 was more than it appeared. And they would have to maintain their deception perfectly, knowing that one slip could mean annihilation. "On my way," Sheridan replied. Tarkin's quarters had been transformed into an Imperial command center. Star charts covered the walls. Intelligence reports scrolled across multiple displays. The Grand Moff stood at the center of this organized information, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calculating. "Captain Sheridan," he said without preamble. "Intelligence indicates increased rebel activity in this sector. Ship movements that don't align with normal commercial patterns. Communications using encryption beyond standard civilian protocols. Someone is coordinating rebel operations from a central location." "And you suspect Babylon 5? Sheridan asked. "I suspect everywhere," Tarkin replied. "The rebellion survives through networks of sympathizers who believe they're safe from Imperial oversight. My task is to prove them wrong. Which is why I'm establishing new protocols for this station. All docking ships will undergo enhanced security screening. All communications will be monitored for rebel encryption signatures. All diplomatic meetings will be documented and reported to Imperial intelligence." "That violates the neutrality agreements we established," Delenn protested. "Governments will not trust us with confidential communications if we share everything with the Empire." "Then they shouldn't conduct communications that threaten Imperial interests," Tarkin said coldly. "Ambassador," the Emperor was clear. "Babylon 5's neutrality exists at his sufferance. If I determine this station is being used to facilitate rebel activities, I will recommend immediate Imperial occupation. Your neutrality will end, your independence will be revoked, and your population will be dispersed to labor camps." Am I making myself clear? The threat hung in the room, undeniable and terrifying. Sheridan felt the weight of 250,000 lives depending on his response. Felt the rebel networks they just committed to protecting. Felt the impossible balance between resistance and survival. "Crystal clear, Grand Moff," he said evenly. "We'll cooperate with enhanced security protocols. But I'll be equally clear with you. If your measures make Babylon 5 impossible to operate as a neutral station. If diplomatic contacts stop trusting us, if commerce dries up because traders fear Imperial seizure of their goods, if we become an Imperial outpost in everything but name, then this station loses its value to everyone, including the Empire. We'll enforce your security requirements. But we'll do it in ways that preserve our utility. Because a dead neutral station is worthless to anyone. Tarkin studied him for a long moment. You negotiate even when facing annihilation. Either admirably brave or dangerously foolish. I haven't determined which. Probably both, Sheridan admitted. But it's kept us alive so far. See that it continues to do so, Tarkin said. Dismissed. As they left Tarkin's quarters, Garibaldi fell into step beside Sheridan. That was bad, Captain. Enhanced security screening means our rebel contacts are at risk. Monitoring communications means our intelligence routing gets detected. Documentation of diplomatic meetings means we lose deniability. Tarkin is closing every hole we might use for resistance operations. Then we adapt, Sheridan said quietly. We route communications through channels he's not monitoring. We conduct meetings in places his surveillance doesn't reach. We move rebel operatives through docking protocols that appear routine. This is what resistance looks like under occupation, Garibaldi. It's not comfortable. It's not safe. But it's necessary. In his quarters aboard Babylon 5, Tarkin reviewed the day's intelligence reports with meticulous attention. The station's command staff was hiding something, he felt it in their body language, heard it in their carefully chosen words. They were too calm, too prepared, too confident for beings facing imperial ultimatums. They were planning something. Or already executing it. He would discover what. And when he did, he would demonstrate to the entire sector what happened to those who believed they could deceive the Empire. Patience was required. Observation. The collection of evidence that would justify the hammer blow when it fell. Tarkin was very good at patience. And even better at delivering hammer blows. Aboard a rebel ship fleeing toward the Outer Rim, Princess Leia reviewed the intelligence she'd gathered at Babylon 5. The station was committed to the resistance, genuinely and completely. Its command staff understood the risks and accepted them. They had resources, connections, and most importantly, the will to resist. She drafted her report to the rebel leadership with careful optimism. Babylon 5 could be a strategic asset, a neutral ground where resistance operations could coordinate invisibly. But she also added a warning. The station existed under direct Imperial observation. If it was compromised. When it was compromised, because all resistance networks eventually were, the consequences would be catastrophic. The rebellion needed to be prepared for that eventuality. Needed contingency plans for extracting operatives, protecting intelligence networks, and ensuring that Babylon 5's inevitable fall didn't destroy the larger resistance. Hope was precious. But hope without preparation was merely wishful thinking that got people killed. The rebellion had learned that lesson many times. They would learn it again with Babylon 5. The only question was how many would die in the teaching. 6 months after Grand Moff Tarkin's arrival, Babylon 5 had become something unprecedented in the Empire's short history, a thorn too valuable to remove but too dangerous to ignore. The station's command staff walked their impossible tightrope with skills honed through years of navigating political chaos in their own universe. Tarkin received regular intelligence briefings that were meticulously accurate yet strategically incomplete. Rebel operatives moved through Babylon 5's corridors disguised as merchants, diplomats, and refugees, their meetings appearing as innocent commerce to Imperial surveillance. Information flowed through channels so subtle, so embedded in normal station operations, that even Tarkin's paranoid scrutiny couldn't separate resistance from routine. But the cost was measured in constant vigilance, sleepless nights, and the knowledge that one mistake would end everything. Sheridan stood in the observation dome on the anniversary of their arrival in this galaxy, watching ships move through Babylon 5's approach vectors. Republic vessels that still bore those markings despite the Republic's death. Mandalorian warships maintaining their protective patrols. Imperial Star destroyers that never quite departed, their presence a constant reminder of how precarious their independence remained. Delenn joined him, her hand finding his with the familiarity of shared burden. "We have survived," she said softly. "Against odds that should have destroyed us a dozen times over. We have built something meaningful in this galaxy." "Have we?" Sheridan asked. "Or have we just prolonged the inevitable?" Tarkin grows more suspicious daily. The rebellion uses us more aggressively, taking risks that increase our exposure. Eventually, something will break. Someone will make a mistake. And when that happens, then we face it as we have faced everything else, Delenn replied. Together. With courage and faith that even in darkness, light can survive. Kar's voice interrupted them through the calm, "Captain, you should see this. We're receiving transmissions from across the sector. Worlds that heard about our resistance to Imperial occupation. Systems considering their own defiance. Babylon 5 has become a symbol, proof that the Empire's power is not absolute." "Dangerous symbolism," Londo added, his voice carrying over the channel. "Every world that resists because we inspired them becomes another reason for the Empire to eliminate us. We are not just surviving, Captain. We are encouraging others to resist. The Emperor will not tolerate this indefinitely." Sheridan knew Londo spoke truth. But he also knew that symbols mattered. That hope was a weapon more powerful than star destroyers. That Babylon 5's survival, however temporary, proved that alternatives to submission existed. In the shadows of Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine observed through the Force as Babylon 5 continued its delicate dance between cooperation and resistance. Tarkin's reports detailed suspicious activities, unexplained patterns, probable rebel connections. But nothing concrete. Nothing that justified the military resources required to crush the station absolutely. Not yet. But the Emperor was patient. And he understood that every symbol of resistance eventually became an example of what happened to those who defied the Empire. Babylon 5's day of reckoning was coming. The station had bought time, created space for the rebellion to organize, inspired resistance across dozens of systems. But time was a resource that eventually ran out. Space could be conquered. And inspiration, when crushed publicly and absolutely, became the greatest deterrent of all. When the moment came, and it would come soon, Palpatine would ensure that Babylon 5's destruction served his purposes perfectly. Not merely eliminated, but transformed into an object lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations. Let them have their small victories. Let them believe their resistance mattered. In the end, all paths led to the same destination, absolute Imperial control or annihilation. On Babylon 5, in the heart of a refugee station that had become the galaxy's most improbable beacon of resistance, Captain John Sheridan made a decision. They would continue. They would resist. They would walk the knife's edge for as long as possible, knowing that the fall would eventually come but refusing to surrender before it did. Because some things were worth fighting for, even when victory was impossible. Some principles transcended survival. And some symbols, once lit, continued to burn even after those who kindled them were consumed. Babylon 5 had come to this galaxy by accident, refugees seeking only to survive in an alien reality. They had stayed by choice, building something that challenged the Empire's narrative of inevitable submission. They would fall, eventually, the mathematics of power guaranteed it. But they would fall standing. Fighting. Proving to the last moment that there were alternatives to tyranny, that neutrality could survive even under the Empire's shadow, that faith managed even when all rational calculation suggested despair. The future was uncertain. The odds were impossible. The Empire's hammer would eventually fall. But until that moment arrived, Babylon 5 would endure. A 5-mile cylinder of rotating hope in a galaxy drowning in darkness. A testament to the principle that even the smallest light could illuminate the void. And in the end, perhaps that was enough. Not victory, but the refusal to surrender. Not triumph, but the choice to resist. Not salvation, but the demonstration that even in the Empire's galaxy, the spirit of freedom could not be entirely extinguished. The Force flowed through Babylon 5, balanced on the edge between light and darkness, order and chaos, survival and sacrifice. And in that balance, something remarkable persisted, the belief that tomorrow could be different from today, that choices mattered even when outcomes were predetermined, that faith managed even when hope seemed lost. Sheridan turned from the viewport, Delenn's hand still in his, and returned to the command center where decisions were made and impossible battles were fought daily. The work continued. The resistance endured. And Babylon 5 stood as proof that even in a galaxy ruled by Sith Lords and enforced by Star Destroyers, the simple act of remaining true to one's principles was itself a form of victory. Not the victory songs celebrated. Not the triumph that history remembered. But the quiet, persistent victory of refusing to become what the darkness demanded. In that refusal, Babylon 5 had found its purpose in this strange new galaxy. And whatever the future held, that purpose would endure. May the Force be with you. More stories await.